try to hit me in the gut, thinking that I won't react. You whispering my name, thinking I won't be the same. Turn fiction into fact. See what you didn't know, bruises that I'll never show, slipping on your every jab. So tighten up your fist, step into the ring with this. I hope your mama's got your back. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. Just 'cause I took a break, you're making a huge mistake, thinking you can take the throne. Look at you trembling, step into the lion's den. Bet you wish you stayed at home. Begging for mercy underneath your breath when I ain't even sweating yet. My legend's written in the stone, yeah. You're crying age in defeat is now your only friend. Even your mama's gotta know. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh.
One of these days, this interface is just foobar. Thank you all for joining us. We've been completely muted. I'm doing good. Will's doing good. Pat's doing good. So now everyone's caught up. I heard that the high school shooter is actually going back to school, and I saw footage of him walking on what appeared to be a sidewalk along a school, and all these reporters asking questions, and it looked like he was going back to school. I don't know if that's. I mean, I couldn't check that out, but that's what that's what it looked like to me. I didn't see it, but if that's the case, holy smoke! And then I got only one other thing that I just thought was interesting that I wanted to bring up, but that was mind-blowing. I tried to find it again before we went live, and I couldn't find it, which so means either I'm hallucinating or yeah.
So I pulled it up. He was the shooting suspect was released on bond Thursday. That's the issue. Yeah, Timothy George Simpkins was released on bail.
Okay, so, that doesn't, of course, necessarily mean that he's back. But what I saw suggested that he was going to school today. Which, if I were if I were a parent at the school, I'd be like, okay, if he's going, my kid isn't. It's really that simple. So
yeah, it appears that police are reporting in their investigation that the fight was precipitated after Simpkins had been reported that he had been repeatedly bullied at school and robbed twice. So he's probably going with an affirmative defense type of. I have a feeling he will not be taking a plea on this based on how he's positioning already and based on what police. He's been charged with 3 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, ADW.
Which is one of the things I noted afterwards was that's usually even in these cases they sort of try to max out what they're going to charge you with on the grounds that they'll plead it down. The DA just hits you with the maximum he could possibly sustain. So and that doesn't appear to be what's going on here, which is a little surprising.
Right. I always, based on my own experience, I always get a little concerned when I see someone charged with ADW when they should be charged with attempted murder with a firearm. It always, to me, seems to be you charge both, right? And assault with a deadly weapon would be the lesser included charge, right? So you always go, with the maximal appropriate charge to start. And in this case, I don't know the laws in Texas, but in California, this would definitely not be how I file the case, particularly involved a firearm with 2 critically injured victims.
And one a 15-year-old. I mean, the other thing is, of course, if you're the DA, you want to be able to negotiate down to something fair. Well, you can't negotiate down to something fair if you start with something fair. So they start with the absolute maximum. And the other thing is to try to intimidate the person coming in. They're like, dude, we're looking at attempted murder. We're looking at attempted, and I didn't try to murder anybody. This is what it's like. Okay, why don't you tell us your side of the story? And if we believe you, we'll knock it down to something. And they do that. And the goal usually isn't actually to get whatever the maximum is. It's to have a place to negotiate from. This didn't strike me as following that pattern. I don't know. That was surprising.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
Definitely a defense attorney's son. I was going to say, the way you worded that, I just say maximally appropriate.
Yeah. Oh, it's yeah. Well, and it's funny too because I get along with lawyers usually very well. With cops, it's always a 50-50. It depends on their experience of lawyers. It's as often as not, and they don't like them, and I understand why. But.
No, it's fine.
Let's see. Then the other one. This is an interesting one. Okay, this is really. I think I just saw this on the news, and what's amazing is this guy has already done a video on it, and it was literally it was in the news. Let's see. Let me pull this up here. So it was in the news today. I saw it on the. Hold on a sec. I saw it really on the front page of CNN. They're talking about it. This guy did a video on it, I think, yesterday. So there's a guy, and let's see, he goes by either Michael MC or, oh dear Lord, Tizzy ENT on TikTok. And I just found out about him, and I've been looking at some of his videos. I really like his videos. We've reached out to him. I would like to bring him on. I think his videos are amazing. They're usually about 2 or 3 minutes. He debunks a lot of shit. He does it really, really well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop one video in the live chat. It's about 2 minutes. And what I'm going to suggest here is pause the stream. You know, pause it. We'll go listen to his video. I was thinking of playing it. And I think because it's, you know, commentary and we're going to comment on it, you know, obviously it's, but you know what? I don't know who the guy is. I don't want to step on any toes. So go pause us. Go take a look at this. Tell me what you think. I thought this was a really good video, and then there was another one which was a little less sensational than the one I'm going to play right now. I'm going to direct you to right now, but it was in some ways even better. So this one is about the news item I saw today, and then the other one that I'm going to drop a link to. He discusses this conspiracy of COVID vaccines that are missing the ingredient list and are missing the instructions and all of the contraindications and all that other stuff, and they're doing so as part of this conspiracy. And he discusses that, and so he debunks sort of dangerous fraud things on. So let me drop the link in the live chat, and then I'll I'll discuss one or two other things. I am a little disorganized today, so it's like all my windows are. No, I can't find anything. So Will, what have you been up to? I haven't seen you around in a little while.
Not a lot of work. Just hanging out on Discord, different things, chatting, been reading a lot, studying a lot, learning a lot. So
that's good. Yeah, I'd really like to get back to for a second I thought and on Jer being as productive as always, said we sounded better while we were muted. Thank you. It's nice to have fans. All right. Oh, it's not going to let me do that. The link is too long. Oh, for crying out loud! Let me give me. Well, I own the channel. It won't even let me post a link to it. So let me see real quick. I will bet you I can shorten that dramatically. It's probably just got like all the extraneous data in there that it doesn't need that they use for marketing. So let me see if I can shorten the video manually. Yeah, that shortened it a lot. Let me try one. There you go. Yeah, I think I can do this. All right. Oh, wow, that shortens it dramatically. It will let me. So it's Tizzy. So I don't know, but we'll let me get this up. Again, this is, if you go to CNN right now, you're going to see what he's talking about. It's right on the front page there. So, yeah, this is for new people, we normally do news, politics, and culture, and we discuss what's going on in the news. We discuss what's going on in the world, especially what's going on in the U.S. Complaints, grievances about various cultural aspects and politics, and then every Friday night we just shoot the shit and we'll usually still kind of talk about the same stuff, but let our hair down, drink, do whatever you need to relax and try to just have a good time and shoot the shit. So I always appreciate it when people show up. So thank you guys both for coming. And it is an open hang, so we're not using the call-in number today, so you can't call in, but you can just Skype in live at intimeshow.com, and for some reason when you do that, it gives me about 10 seconds to reply. So if I'm not Johnny on the spot and I miss it, call in again, and I'll catch you on the second one. But would love to have anybody. Yeah, I think that goes without saying. Nope, no topic today. We don't usually do a topic. It's just whatever we want to talk about. I mean, I have been bouncing around streams a lot recently, and I did what's his name's oh dear Lord, I've forgotten his name, but I He debated Randolph and did a few others, and I was in his stream, and it was a interesting discussion, and it was worthwhile. I don't think there's any point in going back, but I must be a glutton for punishment or something. I don't know what it is. Yeah, hit up Randolph, see if he wants to be if he wants to come in. He may also be busy. Who knows? I've hit up a few other people. Yeah. There's a couple who said they can't make it tonight, but maybe next week, so that'll be good. Anyways, I'm hoping. So,
you got Will and I, so you're good.
I got what?
Yeah, we're good here.
You got Will and I, so you're good.
Oh, I am set for the night.
Complaining about who didn't come on while two people are sitting here.
Okay.
I'm a little less appreciative.
I can leave if you want me to. But
no.
Exactly.
Listen, it was because. Listen, if we don't have someone else to carry the show, you guys are going to be bored with just me. We all know I'll talk forever, and you guys will, fall into a coma. So I was hoping it'll be someone else to keep you guys entertained. It's not going to come from me. Tell me I'm not a lawyer's son. Yeah. So, all right. So what I was going to say was...
Are you not entertained?
Are you not yeah, so I dropped the link.
Sorry.
Pause the show, watch the link, come back. It's only about 2 minutes. And what it's really about is a bunch of parents who have been protesting in front of schools, and they've been protesting other parents, and it's not just parents, actually, it's just citizens who have been protesting parents and students who are wearing masks in compliance with school mask mandates. So you see these people holding up signs and saying, you're traumatizing your kids by putting these masks on, and you're doing all these terrible things to your children, and being pretty aggressive, which you can do now. We've sort of settled on that, especially the Westboro Baptist Church kind of settled that issue for everybody, that you can be pretty pretty aggressive and where you go. So these kids are trying to get to school. Their parents have to escort them now because they're being harassed by people who are pissed that they're following the rules and following the mask mandate. And one of them equated following the mask mandate to rape. So that's, again, it's on CNN. The guy I dropped the link to does a brief commentary on it, and that's really shocking. And it seems to me that if you're honest about the masks and you realize that the mask is really just another piece of clothing that you have to wear, and you don't make it up to be more than it is. I don't think it's traumatizing at all. I don't think my kids are traumatized by it, but they'd certainly be traumatized by a whole bunch of people yelling at them when they're trying to go to school.
Yeah, at the end of the month, there's going to be nothing but kids wearing masks for an entire day, and parents are going to joyously send them to school wearing masks, right? So with Halloween, again, this is the kind of lunacy. I actually saw the CNN news segment earlier today. This is just this is a countercultural movement. This segment, the segment that is quote unquote protesting, it's their desire to be relevant and to make their political and social agenda known, and that's it's just how they're going to do it, is by you don't protest and act like like these people are someplace nice and quiet. No, you go to a school. You make as loud of a stink you can. You say the most offensive things you possibly can within, with what will be tolerated before you, cross into conduct that could be considered disorderly and or offensive to where law enforcement would be involved. So you push that envelope as much as you can, and then, you sit back and watch the consequences because you want to be on CNN. You want to say these offensive things. I mean, this is predictable given the current political situation in our country.
I'm not super in on what's going on with this type of stuff, but what is the current consensus on vaccinated kids needing to wear masks?
Right now, kids aren't vaccinated. If you're under 12, at least, you can't get the vaccine. It's been approved. No, I don't think it's been approved. I think they have filed a request for emergency authorization. It looks like it's going to be granted, and by the end of this month, they should start rolling out vaccines for kids 12 and under. Kids over 12 can, in many cases, and often have been vaccinated.
Yeah, both my sons are vaccinated.
So now the big concerns are as follows. First of all, we've been getting a lot of breakthrough infections. And what that means is even people who are vaccinated, first of all, at a minimum, can carry it. And so, if I've been vaccinated and I have, as we do in my home, a child under 12, that means I have to operate as if I wasn't vaccinated because my youngest daughter isn't and cannot be. So if I get it, even if the vaccine shields me, I can still transmit it to her. So I have to follow the full protocols. Now, somebody else then also could be ostensibly vaccinated, have it, and if they're not wearing a mask, they could give it to me, and so on and so forth. So the idea is, at this point, really everybody should wear a mask. Biden has said that if you work for the federal government, you're going to be wearing a mask or be vaccinated. So he is making these mandates. It's pissing a lot of people off because, hey, this is a free country and you can't tell people what to do. And that's where the rubber meets the road. The reality is, if you are not vaccinated, you are, and if you're not wearing a mask, you are a weapon. And I have been vaccinated, and even wearing a mask, I'm a weapon if I get it. But I'm a lot less likely to be lethal to anybody if I follow those procedures. So that's sort of what the arguments are about. Does that sound right to you, Pat? Anything I missed, you think that?
Yeah, I just don't, personally, I don't like the term breakthrough. I mean, this is just has to do with vaccinated people still, shedding virus, which, a vaccine is as much about your protection and not and preventing subsequent, infections that cause disease, the manifestations of illness, rather than, every time you get exposed and you've been vaccinated, you're still going to undergo an immunological response. And sometimes, particularly with respiratory viruses, that means for a short period of time, you're going to shed virus, which can cause infection on other people because that's part of the natural cycle of a virus. You don't detect the infection with one virus entering your lungs. You have, requirements of viral load. How much virus does it need to come into your respiratory system before you're actually starting to, quote unquote, be infected, right? And then you have the immune response. And then during that immune response, viruses are going to be for a period of time shedding virus. And in a respiratory virus, that means you're going to produce, in many cases, virus that would be possibly able to affect other people. That's just how vaccines work. So I don't like the term breakthrough. I just like the term reasonably foreseeable consequence of a upper respiratory virus. So,
well, and I think that's a good point. Titan knows far more about this than I do. I think that and I may be misusing the word breakthrough. I think in general, when they refer to breakthrough, usually it's someone who actually gets sick from it. But you're still going to carry it either way. I mean, if you're even immunized against it, you're going to be a carrier, at least for a short period of time.
Well, we're just using the term breakthrough. I mean, typically in the medical field, a breakthrough would be something where someone who's been vaccinated produces the disease at a rate where they're now, manifesting clinical symptoms, right? Like you're not just walking around feeling good or feeling slightly not good. You're now manifesting symptoms. But breakthrough is the actual term used in the medical field, even for someone who's just actively shedding virus after an exposure. But the media is using it in a way that it makes it sound like the vaccine itself isn't effective. The vaccine's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, particularly considering it's the vaccine against a respiratory virus, right? This is like, basic immunology,
Isn't that expected? I mean, most vaccines aren't 100% effective, right? So, I mean, like the flu virus is or the flu vaccine is 50% effective. So, I mean, isn't it kind of the expectation that it's not going to work for everyone?
No, actually, so you're conflating two pieces of information. First is the flu vaccine 100% effective? Yes, it is. If we predict the right strain of flu. So against the strain of flu, or strains of flu they're being vaccinated against, it's 100% effective or close to there too, above the 90% threshold. Problem is the current flu vaccine model we have is predictive. They take, what were the main strains last year, maybe a year before? What do we think is going to be around? So they develop vaccines against those strains. And influenza virus is highly mutated. I mean, there's I haven't looked at it in a long time, but I think there's hundreds, if not thousands, of strains of flu out there that could any one time end up back in circulation. But that's one of the problems with influenza is we're using a predictive vaccine model, right? So we're trying to jump ahead of the vaccine of the virus each season with a vaccine, or every couple of years. With how effective a vaccine is, well, you're right, but what the effectiveness of a vaccine, there's two components. Like when let's just say you go underneath your normal course of vaccinations, whether or not you have a robust and long-lasting immune response is really the issue. Does the vaccine in you as an individual, does it produce the necessary immunological response for you to have long-term effective production of antibodies versus this particular viral agent, right? And in some people, we just don't have it, particularly people that are immunocompromised, even though they are eligible to get the vaccine, elderly people, other underlying health conditions, and some people we just don't know why. It's really rare. Sometimes a perfectly normal, healthy adult with a healthy immune system gets a vaccine, and then they go to do titers to see how much antibodies in their system. They're like either none or so low as not to grant any type of reasonable immune response if they were challenged again with the actual virus. But and that's kind of the issue. Like sometimes we get the vaccine, like for influenza, we get the vaccine wrong. We're putting the wrong one out there, and I say we, like science in general. But in some cases, we have your immunological response just doesn't allow you to actually form the natural resistance that the vaccine would elicit with your body's immunology, your immune system. So that it's kind of two different new questions when we talk about it. So it's possible you could have both come into it, right? That not only do you go to get your flu vaccine, not only is it the wrong strain of flu that has been predicted in the model, you may not actually have a response. So it can be two totally different issues, or you just, and it's pretty rare, but there are some people who we can explain a lot of times why a vaccine doesn't work or doesn't produce a robust immunological response in people, but it's almost always this person was unhealthy. That's why they would ask you, are you sick with something else when you go in to get a vaccine, right? Because that's one of the things that could depress a secondary, like you're already sick with something and now you're getting a vaccine, so your immune response may not be as robust as it would be if you were, quote unquote, normal, healthy. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
All right, so we have someone from the live chat who says they're a nurse, so hopefully they'll be in a minute. I did drop the other TikTok video. It's also only about 2 minutes, but I thought it was an excellent takedown of the head of a pharmacy who was demonstrating evidence, she claimed, of how the manufacturers of vaccine were hiding information from people. And you take a look at it, and it seems to me that if you know nothing about these kinds of things, you would buy it. But I really took that down, I thought, very well and explained it. So again, if you want to just pause the stream, watch it, and then play back the stream at 1.5, you'll catch up in no time and get back to where we are. But it's the second video. I dropped it, only a couple minutes. And like I said, we're going to try to have this guy on. I think he seems like a really cool guy. Yeah, I'd love to chat with him.
I just want to point out, if you play it back at 1.5, Nick actually sounds good.
Oh, fucking...
It's kind of...
I would mute you. I would absolutely mute you, but every time I do that, I end up like closing my own shield and knocking myself off the stream. So I'm really not gonna, I am so not gonna, it's working. I'm gonna leave it alone. This is why we need a producer, so that we can deal with situations like you. All right. Well, anyway, so we have a gentleman here, and I don't know how you'd like to be called, so I'll just wait till you introduce yourself and tell us about yourself, and welcome aboard.
Howdy, my name is Jesse Pullum. I'm a registered nurse. I work in a nursing home. I deal with a lot of COVID stuff. I've, been working through, all of COVID. So it's been a wild time to be a nurse, I'll tell you that.
I can imagine. I had a upper respiratory infection not that long ago, and I tried really to stay out of urgent care, but I finally had to go. It was about a 12-hour wait. The urgent care I go to, they have 3 different ones in the area. It's never been more than 30 minutes. It was about 12 hours, got it done, and everybody there was exhausted. You could tell they were exhausted. They were curt. They were mean. They were not happy, and I was just like, it's not their fault. And I did my best afterwards to thank them, because speaking of people who are on the front lines not getting enough credit. So, yeah, I have to believe you've seen some stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've seen some stuff.
That's odd. Like, because here, I just went to the urgent care the other day. I had to get my kids' shot records transferred over from North Carolina to Georgia, and it was empty.
Do you mind letting me know what state you live in? I don't want to.
Georgia.
Tennessee.
I don't know. I mean, we're in Massachusetts. I think we have the fourth highest vaccination rate. We've got that was where we are, of course. Now, I live right outside the second largest city in Massachusetts, so a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm in Atlanta, so.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, okay, I don't. That was my urgent care experience, and it's we're hearing reports of that all across the country. But so, Mr. Pullman, so you wanted to contribute, and first of all, I wanted to just say, was there any stories that to you sort of jumped out now that you're here that you thought maybe you'd let us know of stuff you've seen, and then also you've been listening to this conversation and want to contribute. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we've said so far.
Oh yeah, I'll just listen about the anti-vax stuff. You know, there are so many people around here that are anti-vax, even among healthcare workers that they're anti-vax. Some healthcare workers just refuse to get the vaccine. Even still now, I can think of a couple of my coworkers that are still refusing to get the vaccine. And that all these conspiracies float around about them. Conspiracies about it's going to kill your reproductive organs, and I don't know. That people say that they don't need the vaccine, and they don't. People don't consider other people, because the way the vaccine works is that, you know, everybody has to get it for herd immunity to work, right? And so if the vaccine is like 90% effective, right, that's still a 10% chance you're going to get it, right? It's like people say it's like that's proof that it doesn't work, and like I argue with people on Facebook all the time. And they'll say, see, that's proof that it doesn't work. But I mean, like, people just do not comprehend how the vaccine is supposed to work. It is extremely frustrating to have to educate people on this, because this thing is deadly. Like, people die from COVID like very quickly, and it spreads very quickly. Like, I've seen, like, you know, 500 million wiped out from this thing. It is not fun to get COVID. And I've seen people that like are having breathing problems months and months afterwards, seem to have, you know, permanent damage almost. Like, people are still winded from, you know, even having it like from a long time ago, still having breathing problems. But that's it for now.
Well, the second video that I dropped, what was interesting about that, so she has to be a pharmacist of some kind, which requires actually reasonably significant licensing in the U.S. And she's the head of, she's the not the department head, I forget what it was, but she's the head of the pharmacy for some, like, either major supermarket or you know, Walgreens or whatever. And she was doing a couple of videos on the sort of conspiracies of against vaccines, and suggesting that she wasn't going to encourage anyone to take vaccines, and maybe even she was going to quit because of any vaccine mandates. And then she took a package of vaccine and showed it was sealed, opened it up, and then showed the pamphlet that you always find in these things that just has, like, it's a huge page. It's like a 6x4 page of warnings, instructions, ingredients, the whole 9 yards. And she showed it, and it was blank, except for just one little segment of it. And she said, oh, they've got nothing to hide, right? Then why aren't they giving me the instructions? Why aren't they giving me the ingredients? Why aren't they talking about the warnings? And so the guy in the video that I dropped there, oh, and we've got Eddie. Let me make sure I get him in quick. Well, I got like 3 seconds before he gets booted. I think I made it. He should be in. All right, Eddie will be up. We can hear him now. Eddie, good to see you. Let me finish this story, and then I'll welcome you. So, anyways, what he pointed out was that it did have a barcode that you could scan that would take you to a website that had all that information. The reason that information was on the website and not printed is because this is emergency authorization, and we are still learning these things, and they can't commit it to paper yet because it could change 30 seconds later. The reason the paper was in there was A, you still got the most current information if you followed that website, and B, they were preparing for their final, once they have a sort of a final, this is what we know about it, and putting that in. But things have been moving too quickly, and they want to make sure that people don't read a sheet like that and mistake it for being the final word and actually go and look to find out, because if they print it and then you're opening this thing 3 weeks later, a lot can change in 3 weeks. So they don't want you to read it. They want you to go online and find the current. And he pointed out, every pharmacist in the US knows this. This has been done before. So when she shows you this and says, what are they hiding? She's lying, and she's a pharmacist. So it's really kind of, I think you've got an interesting point of, it's amazing to me how many people are in these fields that are being like this. I want to discuss it with you more. Eddie, welcome. I'll get you a camera in a sec. Jesse, if you don't mind being on screen, I'll get you a camera in a minute too. But Eddie, welcome. How are you?
I don't mind being on screen.
You what? I'm sorry,
Pretty
don't mind
good,
or don't
pretty
want to be? I
good.
didn't catch that. I didn't catch. Did JC? Did he say he didn't want to be on or didn't mind being on? I don't want to put him on if he.
No, I'm fine being on camera.
Okay,
Sorry,
perfect.
that was the wrong time to say that.
So Eddie, you're doing good.
Yes, I am. I am doing fantastic. Mr.
I
Pat Lowinger hooked a brother up, and so I'm going to sit back and reap the benefits.
Well, listen, that was, and I said this to Pat, and I meant it. That was a good show, all of you. That was a really good show, all of you. And Eddie, oh fuck, me staying out of it when there are experts there who are better than me. I know, that's not my strong suit. But you stayed out of it. You let them talk, and then Pat just hosted it spectacularly. And those are some great people to have on, and the chemistry was great. It was a good show. That was a good show.
I had a lot of confidence. In Pat, but I expected. No, I'm serious, Pat. You're a pretty knowledgeable guy and pretty good at taking control of a situation. There's been a few times that we've been in Discord and things like that, and I've seen you control the conversation very, not commanding, but in a good way. You know when to speak up, when not to speak up. You know when time needs to be filled, when it doesn't. And I think it's all the intangibles that I think the show went off without an absolute hitch. I thought you did a fantastic. I had confidence in you, but you actually exceeded my expectations, and I am extremely thankful for you being a part of it and taking on that role, especially at the last minute. And you're muted.
Well, thanks, Eddie. I just think it's easy when you got people like Dr. Carrier and Dr. Bowen, right?
Right.
They're extremely knowledgeable in their fields. They're easy to talk to. They're open to dialogue. They're not necessarily, they don't have an agenda when they come there. I mean, I guess they do in their own ways as far as their own research and their own opinions on, they're in their field, but they're not going there to try to necessarily convince the other person. They're just there to, express their opinion. It makes it really easy. I've since then we've talked. We'll try to do this again in reasonably short form for those that liked this recent episode of Brute Facts. We're going to try to do that again on another subject related to the ancient world. Try to do it through this with the sponsorship of an educational nonprofit, which would be really nice. Keep that going for as long as we can, and rotate different academics, specialists and subject matter experts through, and hopefully get that done.
Yeah, and for the people who aren't aware, this was kind of a trial run for possible future ventures, and that's what Pat and I were shooting for, is to make this a long-term thing, or, at least in the near future, and to make it even bigger and better, than we had. And with that, Pat was awesome enough to work with the Society for Antiquarian Studies to get them a part of this. And there's a potential there for, bigger and better things to come. So, and I was extremely pleased with how everything went.
Well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow just a little bit more smoke up Pat's ass, and then we'll change the subject. But listen, I love hosting, and I really thought that hosting would be easy. I've done lots of debates, and I still have so much to learn, and I realize every now and then how much I have learned, usually through criticism, which really sucks, but is usually reasonably accurate. And so it's not easy, and it requires you have the instinct, of course, to make yourself look good, and you're like, oh, I know a lot about this topic, and I can contribute. I think a little bit of that isn't a bad thing, but it's really hard to keep that in check, and it's hard to make the other people shine and make it about the other people, and really make it also about the audience, so that they are getting what they want out of it instead of what you want out of it. And I thought you did that like a pro, so I was genuinely impressed, because that was a skill set from you I had not seen before. So that was a good show. So. Looking forward to seeing more of that. And anyways, moving forward, so we were just talking about this pharmacist who was deliberately handing out misinformation. There's really, I don't think, any credible way you could say that she could be a pharmacist and not know that why the information wasn't there, and not realize that she could easily get it if she wanted. And here she was spreading conspiracy theories. So this is a pharmacist. So I can't make heads or tails of how much of this there is. Does anybody here have any thoughts?
Personal agendas, man. People like a good conspiracy.
Yeah, but these are people's lives. Part of me is just, is it that they don't get that? Am I, I don't know. I can't fathom that they can't think past that.
Yeah, I'm at a loss. I'm with you. Yeah, I'm one of the few that actually was waiting for an FDA-approved vaccine. And my family, we have high-risk people here, and they were vaccinated early. But I did, I'm a science guy, and I know, I'm not a scientist. I like science. And I know, the risks that come are very rare, and it really, unfortunately, you just have to have a bad roll of the dice to be one of those that has some kind of issue. But at the same time, I just find a level of comfort and, have it. I don't know why I put so much stock in the FDA, but they seem to have not let us down too many times. And so as soon as we got one that was FDA approved, I went straight up there and got my vaccination. I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all, and I have no qualms about it. And I'm just blown away, man. The misinformation, we have so much information at our fingertips, but it seems to work against us with so much misinformation. And it's like, all you got to do is a Google search, man. Just a Google search,
Well, I mean, we were discussing how much misinformation there is. I mean, it's getting better, and it seems to be getting better rapidly. But Google searches don't always help.
No, but you get right. But if you look at, for example, I've looked at different Google searches, and just to Google reaction to vaccine, you get like your first 10 stories are debunking all of the myths behind, vaccine. It just, sometimes it's just as simple as putting in a topic. And I do understand there are sites here that perpetuate the BS, clickbait and things like that. But ultimately, it's going to come down to education, and people, know where to look for these things, reputable sources, how to actually, you don't even have to be an expert to know whether, a study is scientific or not. This is, basic knowledge that should be taught in high school. It's, I could go on and on about it.
All right, Ollie has joined us. I just want to make sure. So he's here. Sorry, there was a little delay in the pipeline there. But Ollie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Our local disc golf expert.
That's right.
Oh, don't get him. Oh, God. Please.
I'm going tomorrow morning for a round. Anyone want to come with me?
That's a long ride, buddy. You give me a plane ride, I'll come. Hey, buy me a
is there
plane
any
ticket.
reason? Can you guys explain maybe the reason why we aren't tracking this seasonally like we do with the flu? Why, like, statistically, we're tracking it since the very beginning of January 2020?
I'm not an expert, and there's probably somebody here who knows better than I. My guess is it's just because we're going to be stuck with it for a very long time. Probably, actually, at this point, they haven't declared it. I forget what you declare it when it's a forever. Oh, yes, he'll answer.
Oh yeah. What exactly is your question? Like you're saying they're not studying it seasonally and they're just studying it since like January 2020. I mean that's when it like started, January 2020, and they've been doing continuous studies since it started.
Yeah, not study. I'm sorry.
stopped.
Statistically, like, so for instance, like with flu numbers, we usually base statistics on the flu season, right? Like there's a season because you have, like, flu exists all year round, right? There's never when there's not any flu, but the peaks of it, right? And COVID does have a seasonal trend as well.
Yeah,
Like,
it tends, I've noticed it tends to be more in the summer, you know.
Yeah. So I was just curious why statistically they're still tracking it from January 1st, rather than comparing, season 2, which is what we would be in now, to season 1, right? I was just curious if anybody had any information on that.
I mean, like, if you wanted to compare them yourself, you could. I mean, I don't know. That's an odd question.
From my hypothesis on that one, and then I got a quick super chat I want to do. I think the problem is we don't know enough about it to know exactly what the transmissibility is going to do. Yes, it goes up and down, but that's more based on our responses to it, and when our responses are strong and weak, and what's been going on with sort of global trends. It's still new enough, to the best of my understanding. We're just tracking it year by year because we don't have enough reliable data to...
Right.
Yes, the studies are always ongoing. I mean, they're still continuing to study this as it goes on.
Right. This is the difference between an endemic virus that has a residual pool in our population, like influenza. And remember, every season we're encountering different influenza than last season. So we talk about seasonal flu. That's almost an issue to deal with, how medical staff gears up and prepares for it as well. This is still technically a novel virus, even though we're learning more and more about it. So
yes.
It's an emergent vector. It's an emergent virus. And so we need to, I don't see it as some form of conspiracy, but I do see it as there are some reasons. I hope in time we're not, in 20 years from now, talking about seasonal COVID rates like we do influenza, because that would ultimately show that we were ineffective.
Hopefully we can eradicate this thing. I mean, we have a vaccine for it. I mean, that's like ultimate goal, is to get rid of this thing.
Any reason to think we won't be, though, Pat? I mean, it seems to me that we're kind of actually losing. I mean, the variants are beating us right now. Beating us in terms of by the race. The race to get it under control. The variants are winning.
Yeah, you're bringing out the pessimist in me. I think we have the science and technology necessary. Right. We have the science and technology necessary to beat this. I really do. I think, from a immunological and molecular biology standpoint, we can eradicate this disease. I think Jesse's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Vaccine hesitancy and vaccine resistance. I mean, resistance to the vaccine, right? Not vaccine.
Yes, absolutely. That's what's going to keep this pandemic going, is people not getting the vaccine.
And there may be, this is from the immunological standpoint, the most terrifying thought of this is that COVID mutates within itself, to develop a vaccine resistance. There may be a version of COVID out there, hypothetically, that we can eradicate, right? What happens if COVID develops a certain type of coating that resists, the attachment of antibodies to it? This would be the worst case nightmare. But there are viruses out there that have developed the ability to resist, the action of antibodies and disease. And
that's a retrovirus.
You got to nip them in the bud as fast as you can. Right.
I mean, retrovirus. That's why AIDS was so difficult to. The retrovirus is coming up with something, and now we have sort of a handle on how it's done. But it's a huge.
Right.
All right, let me interrupt for 1 second. We got 2 super chats. First of all, Sinister Porpoise, thank you so much for your super chat. Google searches, unless patterns are caught, they will tell you what Google thinks you want to hear. Google has only one real goal, and that's to make money. And in fact, in the United States, especially since Citizens United, and I forget what the other one was. It wasn't Citizens United that did this one. But there was one of them that said, basically, if you work for a company, you are legally required to make money for the stockholders for this, and to think first in terms of the company. And so this means that if you're at Google and you're thinking about the average citizen in the United States before you're thinking of your company, that's legally actionable. And I'm not saying that there aren't people who do it. I'm not even saying that there aren't companies that have a good positive culture of doing it. But you're running the risk because you're breaking the law if you do that in this country, which is unfortunate. It's just insane. But Google searches, they want you to use Google, which means they're not trying to give you the best information for you. They're trying to give you the information you think is going to be the best information for you. And those are two very different things. So thank you, Sinister Porpoise. I think that's a good point. I think I'm going to try to get back to that later if I can, but we're going wherever we go. Jake 4D, $5. Thank you, Jake, so much. I really appreciate it as always. So thank you, good sir. You can't really compare COVID seasonally when it's only had one and two. It's hard between 1 and 2 seasons. We don't know when the seasons will truly be. And I think we can speculate, but because it's going to have some things in common with other viruses. When people are indoors, but it's still novel. It's still something different, as I think Pat said. So. All right, perfect. So, anyways, where were we before I rudely interrupted? Because I am being the corporate shill, right? I'm like, oh, people are paying us money, so all you guys could go on hold. So, anyways, we were talking about. Oh dear Lord, what were we talking about?
I mean, for me, it looks like we're doing pretty good. It looks like right now in the United States, we're about 65.6% has at least one dose, and 56%. 100% vaccinated. That's better than I think any country, as far as I know. I have a lot of friends in the UK who they weren't even allowed to get their second dose till like a few weeks ago.
I don't know what the numbers are up here in Canada. I'll go check.
The only numbers that I sort of recall, I wanted. Which one is it? It's not Norway. It's is it the island? Is it? Maybe it's the land of the Hobbit. What is it? Where they filmed.
New Zealand?
New Zealand, is it? I think it's New Zealand that was actually basically at zero COVID, and I think it was a couple of days ago. They
but they have a smaller population than a state, though, right?
They do, but they did complete. I'll get to you in one sec. So they had a complete lockdown. They took this really seriously, and they basically said it will no longer work with Delta. But the countries that have done better with mask mandates have done better, and I think it was estimated that if we had done a mask mandate from day one, just a mask mandate, nothing else, day one, 90% of the people who have died would still be alive. That's staggering.
Yeah.
Yes, but I wanted because I know he was. Yeah. I'm sorry, Mr. Pullman. Yes, he wanted to say something real quick.
Yes, I was looking at the New York Times, tracking the coronavirus vaccination rates around the world. Looks like the United Arab Emirates is the most, with 96% vaccinated. Portugal 87% vaccinated. Cuba 84%. Malta 84%. U.S. is way down here on the list. It's way down.
Right, but you got to understand the countries you just mentioned are smaller than most of our states, right?
Yeah, that's true. But there's Chile, Cambodia, Spain, Uruguay, China, Canada, Norway, Iceland, South Korea, Aruba, Bhutan, Denmark, Ireland, Malaysia, Italy, France, Finland, Belgium, Netherlands, Maldives, UK, Japan, Brazil. I'm not even close to the US yet. And that's an order of vaccination rates. I'm just on the New York Times right now. I mean, you can go look at the list.
It's pretty. Jesse's right. I think it's less about population and more about resources allocated from those countries. I mean, Canada is, 78% at least one dose, 73% fully vaccinated. I I think that's really where we should be at. And like the UK, there's 73% have received at least one dose, and then 67% fully vaccinated. So they're doing fairly
I
consistently
find
better
that
than us.
odd. Like, I really find that odd because, like,
Why?
maybe it's just my family is the outlier, right? We got vaccinated a long time ago, right? And like as soon as they opened it up for people down to the age of 12, my kids got vaccinated. Like all of my friends, like my friends in Ontario, they didn't even have the choice to get vaccinated until like a month ago.
Well, I think
Depends on
part of
the
it,
age.
in the U.S., we are more divided than at any time since the Civil War. I think if it really would have depended on who was president and how he framed it. Now, our president decided to use it as a wedge issue. If he hadn't have done that and had instead framed it as a patriotic thing to do, and or especially if a really prominent Democrat had come out and said, nope, we're not going to do this because our president, Trump, is saying we should, you would have seen everything flip. You'd have seen the Republicans going hard into it, and then my suspicion is because Democrats do tend to trust science and government more, they would have come around much quicker than the Republicans have been. But in either way, I think how it was framed originally by the people in power, did they choose to frame it in a divisive way that they could use as a wedge issue, which is just, that's how we do things now in this country, or did they try to find a way to steer into it in something positive, and we did not go that route. So I think that's where you have the biggest problem, and people are entrenching not based on the data, but based on fields.
It looks like there's been two big jumps. So maybe it was in the United States because like we got those before June, right? So in June there was a big jump worldwide, went from like 11% to 20%.
Can I give you the perspective from outside of the U.S.?
Yeah,
Please.
You guys had the vaccinations really early and readily available, and it was available for all of your age categories much earlier than anybody else. Your problem is a big chunk of your population just doesn't want to take it.
Absolutely, 100%.
So that here in Canada, yeah, we didn't get the doses as early as you did. That's why it was taking longer for us to get them. But our population is lining up saying, yeah, vaccinate me.
Yeah, I got my vaccine back in January of 2020, and got my second dose in February
like March
2020. So it was available pretty early, and there was some that got. I knew personally some that got it in December.
Well, I think to be fair, it's hard to compare the two when one country gets it long after the other, and we've had plenty of time to assess and analyze the efficacy of the vaccine, whether there's any, kind of dangers or anything with that, because they were extremely quick, to roll the vaccines out.
I mean, it looks really bad on the U.S. That's what he's trying to say. And the studies are out there. I mean,
but that's what I'm saying. But after it's already been out and we now know that that they are effective and there aren't these, issues, of course people are going to be lining up. In other countries to get it,
which makes it look even that much worse.
Well, and keep in mind, I mean, what's the voting rate in the U.S.? I mean, the reality is we are an extraordinarily privileged country, and that means we tend to turn our nose down at a great many things that we just find ourselves above. Voting, by the way, being included among them. And, there are countries that look at us and say, you're supposed to be the pillars of democracy, and 50% of your country couldn't care enough to drive down to the voting booth and just so I mean, that's the country that, of course we're going to be turning down those vaccines to at least to some extent. I didn't think it would be this bad, but I'm not surprised either.
But also you got to remember the backbone of this country, kind of historically has been to be leery of government, and all those things play into the mindset of Americans. I'm not saying it's the right mindset.
I would like to say that a lot of it comes from anti-science propaganda that people have been learned from birth. Like, I live in the Deep South, in the buckle of the Bible Belt. I grew up with creationism, believing that the earth was 6,000 years old and that, Noah's Ark, we had the Bible in one hand and Ken Ham's books in the other. Like, that's how I grew up, and most people around here believe all that. And they have just an inherent distrust of scientists. I mean,
I don't, but I live in this, I also live in the South, and every single person that I know is vaccinated. It's everywhere that I go here. I'm in Northwest Arkansas. Everywhere that I go here, the vast majority of people wear masks and have been wearing masks even before the mandate. So there may be
over there.
Are you in a big city or are you in like a little community?
Well, it's an odd setup. It's about
He lives in a place where there are no big cities, though.
Yeah, it's a bunch of cities together. There's about 500,000 people here in the area, but it's 70,000 in this city and 70,000 in the city next to it, and so it's kind of like a conglomerate of a bunch of small cities.
If I'm wrong about this, correct me, but it seems to me that the more democratic people live in the bigger communities and closer together, and the more Republican people are the ones that are living out in the country and away from other people.
Just look at it county by
Is
county.
that true?
People who voted for Trump,
Yeah. Well, that's always been historically. Your cities have always been more left leaning historically.
Yeah. And those are the people that are getting the vaccine, right? That's why you're noticing all the people around you. Yeah, they're getting the vaccines because you live in a big community, and most of them people in your area probably.
It's 80% Republican voters here.
Yeah, but
I mean, seriously, it is extremely conservative here. There's not who in the world is playing with the together mode.
Yeah, somebody put, and that used to be disabled. I don't know how that got enabled. Please don't put the together mode on. It should be disabled. It's not, and then it screws with the cameras. We're not supposed to be. I'm gonna guess Randolph because Randolph.
Yeah, you guessed right. Sorry about that. I'm
trying to pop these balloons, but they won't go away.
What blows my mind is I've been listening to a keyboard the entire show, but Randolph is muted. So it's sort of like, I know it's not, but I just want to give him a hard time about it. It's just like, it's not him.
I'll apologize for that, even though I wasn't doing the typing, but you can tell it's not me. It wasn't very fast.
You're Canadian, so you're going to apologize anyway. Well, so one of the things I wanted to point out was, even if, I mean, we can have these arguments about, and this was an interesting fact that I'd like to talk about just because it's an interesting one. This virus also hit liberals before it hit conservatives by a wide margin. And it's for that same reason, because you tend to find more liberal people in cities, and cities are going to get hit first before the rural areas.
That was before the vaccine. You got to think about that. That was before the vaccine.
But that also means that the liberals are going to be more aware of the problem faster. And it's like, as it's hitting more conservative areas, they're now more concerned because, hey, it's them. And this was one of the things I'd said about Donald Trump. He was just like, well, we don't need to worry about it. I was like, yeah, that's because it's Boston, Los Angeles, and, the major liberal hubs that are getting hit hard by this when it started. As soon as it's Dallas, Texas, all of a sudden he's going to start to care, which is basically what happened because that's his voting bloc. But in any case, one thing you cannot deny is right now, Texas and Florida in particular, but a couple of other states, those two in particular, are huge problems because Texas, their governor has literally said, you know what, if other people are worried about this and they want to protect their towns in my state, if they want to protect their districts in my state by having a mask mandate, they can't. I'm going to make it illegal, and has been doing this massive pushback against. He says, I'm going to say it's important, but you don't have to do it. And that's why they're having such a hard time. Both and then Florida has just rolled back anything they had, and so these very conservative areas, I don't think you can deny. I forget what percentage of the current COVID cases are in those two states, but it's a huge percentage. And they don't. It doesn't matter to them that their healthcare system is literally failing because of this, and people are dying of treatable conditions because they can't get to the hospital in time, or they can't find an operating room or doctors who are free to do it because they're doing triage in the parking lot. That's what's happening, and I understand freedom, but give me a break.
I'm trying really hard to try and convince my parents not to go down to Florida for the winter. I know that the borders aren't open yet, but they're talking like, if the borders open, we should go down. Like, no, don't go to Florida. pandemic central.
Well, I mean, I've been to Florida a couple of times, and even before there was a vaccine, we were fine.
Well, yeah, but they had that. What, they opened up the beaches just for, and this was, I think, last year. They opened up the beaches just for spring break, and then 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after Mardi Gras too, which they decided to hold anyway. They I think they canceled the first and then had the second one, and it ended up huge spreads just across. You could track it. It's utterly insane. Hold on one sec. We're gonna
this anti-vax stuff gets so much worse. Like put on such a high platform, like you're saying in like Texas, it's promoted by such big politicians, and it gives it like some sort of legitimacy. Well, even in the minds of the people, and it just spreads like wildfire. It just anytime these politicians, especially in Texas, like you were saying.
It's entirely political, the whole anti-vax thing.
Yeah, and it's so sad that they've made it into political. I mean, this stuff kills indiscriminately. I've seen countless people die from this thing. I mean, it's awful.
Yeah, but I mean, the COVID-19 anti-vax crowd, and anti-mask stuff, that's all political, because it was Donald Trump who first said that it's optional according to CDC, so he's not going to wear one. And the next day is when suddenly all this new anti-mask thing started up. So it's all him. And every anti-masker I've met is pro-Trump. I haven't met one yet who isn't.
Yeah, they do seem to correlate, don't they?
Yeah.
How much of this is fear? How much of this is... They say they're not afraid of it, right? And that's why they're not going to wear the masks. But, I find oftentimes, that's what, when you're most afraid of something is when you pretend not to be afraid of it and you try to show the brave face. How much of this is they're actually afraid of something, they don't understand it, and so they're in denial. And what they're doing is they're actively saying, nope, it's not a problem, and that's how they cope with the fear. Is that, does anyone here think that's an issue, or am I just...
No, I don't think so. I think they're just following their leader.
Yeah, and just they were primed to be able to go for stuff like this because, like, a lot of these people who live in the South, I live in Tennessee, they were primed to distrust scientists. Like I say, being raised with like kind of anti-evolution and creationism from birth, tend to contribute to all the conspiracies.
I don't necessarily know if there's a correlation between anti-evolution and
I wouldn't go that
science.
far and say
it's a little bit of a fallacy.
Because I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I was born and raised there. I don't know very many people who are anti-evolution, but are evangelicals. There's quite a few of them that are young Earth creationists, but it's...
Yeah, I'm just talking about what I grew up around here. Like, just about everyone I grew up around were all young Earth creationists in Middle Tennessee.
Where did you grow up?
Middle Tennessee.
Okay. Yeah, is it more rural or...
Yeah, it's a very rural area, yeah.
And that seems to correlate with... I was looking at the Pew research. It seems to be the more rural people are...
Absolutely,
more likely they are to not get the vaccination.
Yeah.
Well, and the lower risk they are of getting in the first place. Right.
And some of them don't even think it's that serious. They just say, I ain't hurting nobody by not getting a vaccine. It's my right. And they think it's a freedom issue. Like, it's not really a freedom issue. Like, you can swing your fists all you want, but that right ends at the tip of my nose, right? That's the same thing with the vaccine. You're putting other people's lives at risk when you don't get the vaccine and go around coughing and spraying your germs on everybody,
Well, if this isn't eye-opening, I don't know what is. So according to the Pew research, white evangelicals, Protestants, 40% not vaccinated.
Does not surprise me at all.
57% vaccinated, as opposed to Catholics at 82%, unaffiliated at 75%, atheists 90%, agnostic 80%.
Go atheists!
Yeah,
yeah,
that does not surprise me at all.
And that just, and I think there was another poll I was reading. It was 60% of Republicans who choose party over Trump the numbers were extremely high in vaccination versus the Republicans who choose Trump over party. So if anybody says Trump didn't have, and I'm a libertarian, I can't stand either side. So anybody that says that Trump didn't have an effect on that is just, I mean, they're just lying out their ass or uneducated on it.
Did that report mention anything about the Muslim demographic? Because I've noticed it seems hit and miss with Muslims, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint.
It's a huge minority here, though. So,
well, I mean,
Yeah,
even
there's not very many of them around here.
even Black Protestants are at 70%. So it seems
Yeah, that's
to be
good because they're a more rich
white
population
evangelical
die from
problem.
it.
I mean, that's the evangelicals. They got to step up, man.
You got to understand too that I would say that probably if you were looking at any vaccination statistic, the numbers would be similar because most white evangelical people aren't getting their kids any vaccines, right? Through a religious exemption.
Well, that's a good point to put in there, but I don't know if that high a percentage is anti-vax though.
Well, evangelicals, it's going to be higher. Now, evangelicals is kind of a minority in the Christian community, but yeah, it's going to be higher.
No, they're the majority where I live as far as evangelicals go.
Yeah, southern U.S., it's white evangelicals are most definitely.
Yeah, it's like 80% and
overwhelming
above.
majority.
I'd say the population is white evangelical around here.
Here in BC, which is westernmost province in Canada, the evangelicals are very anti-vax, and even for the next province, Alberta, and a little bit in Saskatchewan, we see that. So my guess is probably all across Canada would see that with the evangelical Christians, that they're very strongly anti-vax.
Well, no, here in the United States, most states have a religious exemption, meaning that if you have a religious reason why you don't want to vaccinate your kids for school, you fill out a form and get exempt from that.
But I think Alabama and
problem.
Mississippi are the two that don't of all the states that don't. I think those two don't.
Well, here they're just approving Pfizer vaccines for children under 13 or under 12 or something around that age. But and the response from children is that they all want to get vaccinated. Almost all of them.
I think the anti-vax crowd, though, I think that kind of overall anti-vax splits down the middle between believers and non-believers because amongst non-believers, there's a lot more natural medicine followers, people who want natural alternatives.
Well, I mean, yeah, before COVID, the
Non-believers.
anti-vax position was a left position, right? It wasn't a right position.
What's that?
Before COVID, right? If you go back to like 2018 polling data, right, the anti-vax crowd was a left position. It wasn't a right position.
Right.
Well, that's not before COVID. That's 100 years ago. There's a difference.
No.
It's not 100 years ago.
It absolutely
Look
was.
it up.
The absolutely the
2018.
anti-vax. As a matter of
You
fact,
said
I have
19.
several
I thought you
atheist
said
friends.
1918. So I thought you meant the previous 1918.
2018.
Okay, my bad. Sorry.
No, I have quite a few atheist left-leaning friends who have been extremely activist against the anti-vax left-leaning crowd because it has been a terrible phenomenon before the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, just like pull up any political horseshoe and it'll throw anti-vaxxers on the left before 2018.
But again, you're misrepresenting the stats. There were constituent anti-vaxxers in both sides. In the left, they tended to be anti-vax naturopaths, and on the right, they were religious evangelicals. And what we're seeing now is that that group in the left is decreasing in size, particularly in the last.
Right. Well, that's the point Will was making. Was traditionally it was a left issue, but now it has become a white evangelical problem.
And I must say, for the record, like atheists tend to, are more scientifically minded and don't go for those homeopathic type medicines. They seek like regular medicine, And speaking as for myself as an atheist,
Yeah, but you're going to have numbers to back that
Let me
up.
just
You
interrupt
can't
you.
just make a broad claim like that and say
The
atheists.
alternative medicine crowd,
Because I know
Canada.
plenty of atheists that are very mythical. Or,
I can't
mystical
say for all
or-
atheists. Not all atheists, are atheists for the same reason.
It looks quite
Let's
different here
let-
in Canada, though. Like the alternative medicine crowd, most of them are pro-vax. I'm not seeing much anti-vax in the alternative medicine crowd here in Canada. The demographics are quite different here.
We are being overrun by Canadians. I'd like to welcome Marianne. She's arrived. So this is.
Well, I'm here, but I'm actually trying to activate my camera, so I may join you a little more fully shortly.
Okay, all right. Well, just wanted to say hi and make sure, because if I don't, then you're going to bail thinking that you're not. I don't. I'll develop a procedure where I don't have to interrupt people and make sure that you guys know that you're on. I don't mean to interrupt it because it was good. And Eddie was sitting there talking about all the terrible atheists because that's what he does. That's what I know you, Eddie. I know your secret plan to go out and trash
Heathens,
all
you're all
atheists.
going to hell to burn for eternity.
Yep. That's.
Fuck
Yeah,
you,
that sounds
your
like
idea
Eddie.
of health.
So, I don't know enough about the numbers. This is the first I've heard about anti-vaxxers on the left, but it's politics gets so
Me too.
weird that I'm not
No,
going to sit there and say it's.
If you can remember back to 20 years ago, particularly as the issues with vaccines and autism were raised, there was a huge pushback in some
that was
areas.
The left, really.
Yes, many of them were. I mean, there were constituents in both sides, and that's the interesting thing. So, but the left did have their component of anti-vax that was pretty vocal, even on the left.
Yeah, most of the anti-vaxxers I know here are very right-leaning and very religious, typically.
So the same for here.
I think, but also to be fair, I think it's more moderates that lean left. I wouldn't say the far left or real left leaning would be. I think because the moderates, the pendulum can swing easily, between left leaning, right leaning, left or right, and I think that's probably what we're seeing is we have a lot of those that are a little more moderate that identify, on the right or lean right, that now we're shifting that anti-vax. And it's really, you can just look at the political atmosphere and you can almost look at, political rhetoric as to who becomes anti-vax, who becomes anti-science, who becomes it just, and unfortunately, the idiot Republicans are just fanning those flames of anti-science, and I'm just like, all for political gain. Who knows what they believe? We'll never know. They're going to do wherever the wind's blowing, and whatever they think is going to get them reelected or keep them in office, or they don't care. And it's sad because the amount of damage that it does. How could you not take that into account over your career? It boggles my mind.
I just realized on a slightly different. So I've known Marianne for a while, and I've been trying to. Marianne is just one of those. It's like she's very forgiving. She's very nice. She apologizes for everything. It's absolutely disgusting. So I said I had to hook her up with Randolph. So I've been.
Yeah.
So it's the first time the two of you. I don't know that I've been in stream, but I was like, at some point, because I think the two of you would share a lot of ideas in common. So, but
wait, what's that got to do with being nice? Are you hooking me up to get like a beating here, or is this just going to be so nice we make each other sick, or what?
Well, no, it's just because when I thought of people who were just like so nice, you're just like, oh dear Lord, I'm an American, okay, I can't tolerate that kind of. It's like you have to be confrontational, you have to be aggressive. So I just said, okay, the two of you need to talk to each other, and you'll speak each other's language, and you'll do great.
Cool. I will mention while I've temporarily got the floor here that my I'm using my laptop, my government-issued laptop as a government employee, and every time I try to adjust my camera settings for Skype to activate the camera, I get this message that says, your browser is managed by your organization. And I don't have admin privileges, so I guess I have a chronic excuse now. I can't see a way around this. And I can't see going and telling IT that I need them to give me, like, access to camera on Skype so that I can hang out with you guys.
Well, first of all, you've been on the show before, so I don't buy it because we've seen you on the show. If anyone wants to know
what I look like, it's not like there isn't video out there.
And then the second thing is you've got a perfect. This is international outreach. You are trying to make nice with the Americans, and you're trying to burnish the relationship between America and Canada. I think it should be encouraged. But that's we got.
Well, given that your shows are, recorded and available later, maybe if I make one positive comment about the Ontario government in every show, I could make that fly.
You could make that. Yeah. That's. Oh, dear Lord, we're gonna really start to press the gas on corporate shilling. But okay, actually, that's not corporate shilling.
But no, I'll give you one today. This is totally off topic, but it is kind of interesting. So we have what passes for right wing in Canada, which is pretty centrist in the U.S. Yeah, super centrist in the US. Like, your right wing is so much more than ours. But we've got a relatively right wing government in Ontario right now. And shockingly, they just announced today that they are furnishing free menstrual products to all schools, which, I mean, for those of you who don't know, period poverty is actually a pretty serious thing. I know it sounds ridiculous, but for people who are having trouble affording food and rent, and there are a lot of them, sadly, buying those kind of products regularly is a huge dent in their budget. Like, this is actually a big thing. And there are those who argue, and I'm among them, that if we supply toilet paper, there are excellent reasons for that. We should really be thinking about supplying something that is so much more dangerous not to have if you start messing around with substitutes.
That's uncharacteristic of right-wing government.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's. Oh, okay. You know what? I just realized I can never tell my employers about this particular show because I'm not allowed to criticize my employers and say I'm shocked that they did something I approve of.
Expression here in Canada, I think you'd be okay because you're not on company time.
No, but if I go arguing that they should give me access to my video in my browser and they say why, then they go look at my history and say, oh, that's how she's using Skype.
Yeah. Anyway. I sent a message in the private chat, by the way, that might be helpful to you with that.
Okay. I will check it out. But anyway, that is really shocking for what is a quasi right-wing government.
Yeah, that surprises me because here in BC, the right-wing government would be totally against that. The only way they'd put it into schools is in vending machines, but they're not in power here in BC right now, fortunately.
Well, we had them in vending machines when I was a teen, yeah.
They do in the elementary schools that way too.
Yeah. But no, this is bizarre. The only thing I have to admit I'm pretty skeptical about is they're doing it through a deal with the biggest. I don't think Americans would recognize Shoppers Drug Mart, but it is owned by the richest family in Canada, the Westons, and they're good buddies with our premier. So the fact that this deal is with Shoppers is interesting.
Their commercials are so insincere. They talk about how they care so much about everybody and their employees and all this, and yet we see their employment practices are, I don't know what to think about it.
And I'd like to welcome one more. Chris has showed up. So Chris, good to see you. How are you?
Hello, Chris.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep. Welcome.
We can hear you good. So, we just did something like that in the U.S. I forget what it was, but there was I think it was a state that just made something available to all high school women. I forget what it was. So, has anyone here? It made big news, and it's been controversial. I know the what is it, the human the PV what is it, the PvP vaccine has been also controversial for any number of reasons. But I'm curious if there's any overlap between that and COVID. People who are there's got to be people who are against that vaccine and also against COVID.
The what vaccine? The player versus player vaccine?
No, the human papilloma virus, or however it's pronounced. The
HPV.
Yeah, thank you.
HPV.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Gardasil shot, right?
Yes, I think that's it. Yeah, and it says to prevent cancer that you are at risk.
HPV can be deadly and can lead to ovarian cancer and all kinds of other bad things.
Which is another. Please,
guys
please.
get that vaccine too, right?
So what's the controversy?
Well, the controversy is especially, again, in the South and in more conservative states, because you're not at risk for it if you're not sexually active. They feel, A, by getting it, you are encouraging sexual promiscuity and somehow seeding that your children will be sexually active, which, if you hope and pray enough, will, of course, never happen. So I think that's what it is, and I think they think it's both permission. It's implicitly giving the child permission for sex. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not. We haven't been able to make it part of any of the routine vaccinations that people get because of this huge pushback from it, because ostensibly you only need it if you're sexually active. But of course, that's just prophylactic. You take it before you're sexually active. But it's a very emotional response, I think, and it's interesting. I mean, fuck. I emotionally respond, right? I get angry. I can. So I mean, I'm not trying to sit there but there's something about how emotional we respond to what we see in the news and to what we believe, and then we do really crazy things. Like, I mean, again, I still do think that part of maybe not the majority of it, but part of the people who are opposed to vaccines, they're just terrified of the virus, and that's how they're dealing with the fear. Nope. Pat's like, nope. Nick's just dead wrong.
But comment on the HPV vaccine. I grew up in a very religious household, and my dad is a Southern Baptist preacher, and he didn't want my sister getting that vaccine because he thought it would be promoting sexual promiscuity. So I just thought I'd make that comment.
I think that's the concern. And
what are they giving these vaccines here? Like, I don't understand. So, like, you have to understand, my kids were born in Korea, and they got those vaccines at 3. So, at what age are they giving the HPV vaccination? And I have 3 boys. I don't even have girls. So,
I think they recommend them usually between 10 and 13. And again, it's best to get it, of course, before you're sexually active. I don't know.
What state is the 10, 13? My kids just got that vaccine, and that it's not a 7th grade vaccine.
Well, listen, I don't know why. I mean, if it's safe to give to a 3-year-old, I don't know why you wouldn't give it to a 3-year-old.
I think it's a younger vaccine than that.
Well, I think they right now that I've heard, the recommendation is between 10 and 13, and I think it just they start thinking like, and I mean I buy the argument a bit more with condoms. Like, okay, if you make condoms available in the high school, kids are going to have more sex. Well, there is a little truth to that, but they're kids. At that age in the high school, they're going to be trying to get all the sex they can. And the difference between having condoms available and not, the biggest difference is how many of them are going to get pregnant. And how much disease is going to spread. That's the biggest difference.
It looks like here in the U.S., you can get it starting at age 9, but they recommend it at ages 11, 12. Those 1 and 2.
I can let my dog go.
All right, cool. See you.
But in Korea, my kids all got it before the age of 9.
Now, is there a reason it's recommended for that? I mean, I know in general the thinking is, at least as I understand it from doctors, is you give vaccines kind of as late as possible so that the people have developed as much as possible, and you minimize the risk, because there's always risk, and the older the patient, the less risk there's going to be. So you just do it as late as possible, but still early enough that you're getting the full efficacy of it.
Yeah, so in Korea, they do vaccines completely different. Like, so all of my kids have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 18 dots on their left arm. And they hit you at the age of like 2 with like 10 different things.
And they cause the permanent scarring on the.
Yeah. So they all have like this little permanent little. They used to do it all in one spot. So like my wife has a big giant scar on her left shoulder, and then my kids, because they've changed it to they did smaller spots in more areas so that it would leave less scarring, or it wouldn't be as noticeable. Yeah, they do that there. And then here too, I mean, getting vaccines here in the United States is not cheap, and especially if you're from a low-income family, and then even moving from state to state, it cost me $227 just to get my kids' shot records transferred from North Carolina to Georgia.
All right, hold on. I think we have one more person who wants to come in. I'm probably going to start to limit it after that, so we don't have too many people over talking. You had told me about being in Korea before, but I've forgotten how and why.
Yeah, I lived there for 13 years. Stationed over there at first time. Went over there to teach English after finishing my degree, and got married and stayed there till 2015. So.
Hold on, I think it's going to be the last person for now, just so we don't have too many. And then you would. I'm just trying to remember because you and I first met. I think it was on Amy Newman's, and it was a little while back. And so I don't actually, because I couldn't. I was new there. I couldn't tell, but you from, just somebody who just dropped in. So I'm just sitting there going, is this a guy who's a regular who I'm going to want to get to know, or is this just somebody? So, and I sort of remembered your story when I was multitasking. I'm sorry, what?
Pat had to go.
I was just saying goodbye to Pat.
Oh.
Later, Pat.
Later, Pat. Good to see you.
Later, Pat.
But then you talked about your. I do remember you talking about how you had become a theist and your experience, and I do remember it being tied to events there, if I recall, and some. But anyways, that was it. At some point, I'd love to hear the story again. Now is probably not the time, but we'll have to. Oh, wow, was it? So I'm exhausted. We'll have to get to it at some point. I think this, I'm fascinated by those kinds of stories. So, I'm an atheist, so I obviously usually believe in naturalistic explanations for them, but that doesn't mean they're not important or powerful. So, I certainly like hearing them. Oh, wow. All right, let me see.
Yeah, I mean, over there it was, vaccinations were a big thing too. Like I got I don't even know what vaccines I got when I was in the military. I got like 30 of them at one time. That was fun. But over there, they do it like, let's put it this way. North Carolina has the strictest vaccination requirements for all kids in the United States. And my kids had more than that. Yeah. Yeah, they require more school vaccinations.
So all of those vaccinations, that explains what's wrong with you, Will.
Could be.
Nothing explains what's wrong with Will.
He's a Calvinist.
That's what we're just going to tell the audience, just so you know, guys. The reason is because he's a Calvinist. Who did a great debate on our. I thought that was a really good debate. I love Floyd. I was glad that he was willing to be a part of it. So, but you certainly did.
Well,
so
Will is one of the most gracious Calvinists that I've met. I actually don't mind talking Calvinism with Will because he has a bit of rationality to him.
Oh, I think he's fair, and he also listens. He's an active listener to whenever somebody is so. That's always it's great, and Will's got a good personality. Don't tell him I said that because am I hot? Oh crap.
Yeah, you're hot.
No.
I can hear you.
He's muted. He's muted. I mean,
And also, but you guys are all going to hate this.
I'm
But
muted.
for the last week, though, I've been studying a lot of Van Til, so who knows where that's going to lead.
Oh, dear Lord.
let me tell you. Okay, I can stomach the Calvinism. If you become a presuppositional Calvinist,
Oh, dear Lord, no. Yeah, he's done.
Well,
He's done. We're done.
we'll have to have a divorce. It just,
Have a divorce. I don't know. I think it's a tool for a different thing. I think it's valuable. I'd like to have it as a tool in my toolbox when needed. Let's put it that way.
Well, here's the thing. You can
It's not
reason
something
your
that I
way.
would. Yeah.
You can reason your way to an ontology, but when you put the ontology first and you try to prove that ontology, that's the issue with presuppositionalists. And it's the style like Darth Dawkins and things is just to shut down conversation. That is the purpose of it. You can't account for your worldview, so we're not going to go any further. And
For me,
do it
what I
without
think
begging the question.
where it's valuable is with people who are reasonable, who are willing to actually have a conversation, like Randolph, for example. I would never even try to pull that tool out of the toolbox if I'm having a conversation with Randall, because we're both reasonable people. We can have a conversation. We're not going to crap on each other, right? But if I do get involved with somebody who's extremely philosophically minded and is just going off in some sophistry or something like that, and I just want to shut it down, it would be a nice tool to be able to come out and be like, bleh, right, and then just because I want to end the conversation, not concede, right?
Yeah,
And
That's totally reasonable.
that's a good, honest way to put it. Is end the conversation, not concede. I like that. That's a politician's approach.
Yeah, well, you got to have a tool for certain types of people, right? Like I would never. It's not my style. I don't like having those types of conversations, but I would like to have the knowledge, the philosophical understanding to be able to not just be like, huh? What are you talking about? I don't know what you mean. You know what I mean?
If you want a good, and I hate that I'm going to say this because of the name, but if you want a good transcendental approach, which is what the presuppositionalist position is, forgive me, Lord, for saying this name, J. Dyer. J. Dyer.
Who's that?
Oh, he is Eastern Orthodox, but he's the only one of the only Orthodox, any Orthodox that.
Oh, he's got those short YouTube videos. I remember you telling me about him before.
Yeah, he's got some. Now you can't look at his Hollywood conspiracy stuff, but on Eastern Orthodox theology and the transcendental argument for God, he doesn't use it like Darth and things like that, and he actually knows all the nuances to it. So
I've been I'm up to chapter 2 and part 2 of Van Til's book so far. And to be honest with you, Van Til doesn't use it the way Darth does.
Yeah, right. That's why you heard me in the Discord server say I'm okay with Van Tilian, presuppositionalist approach. It's the modern day presuppositionalist I have a problem with, because Van Til doesn't come out and say justify your position or don't talk. It just. Yeah.
I don't think Darth. That's just Darth, right? I don't think. Yeah. I think that's
no. That's a Sci-10 approach. That's a borderline Matt Slick approach. Sci-10's the one who started presuppositionalism the way that we know it now.
Gotcha.
He was about 6 years ago. He was the talk of anything presuppositional.
I remember those times. Yeah, Sci-10 Brigantine.
Yep, yeah, Sci-10. He was the one that started the entire justify your worldview, stop stealing from my worldview. All of that came from Sci-10.
Well, I'll just avoid him then. I'll just go straight to this way. Like Bonson and Van Til, they're two people that I'm concerned with. So.
Well, I would say he popularized it. I think people may have been talking about that before him, but he definitely.
Well, no, the way that we know presuppositionalism is what Sci-10 had done. He is the one who started the Darth style. Darth is a total clone and knockoff from Sci-10.
But with a deeper voice.
With a deeper voice. I wish my voice was deeper.
Voice.
Let's get the radio voice.
Well, you've got that. Listen. You can. Nobody hears my voice, but for this mic, right? So I can turn myself into Mr. The late night radio. Welcome everyone to After Dark. My name is Nick.
The key is when you get closer to the microphone, it picks up more bass, so it gives you that real deep sound.
How deep do you want me to go for it?
That's good to know. Okay.
I can't use.
You gotta get closer. You gotta be careful. You gotta be careful not to pop when you're this close to the microphone too.
Now it sounds like we're doing like ASMR or something like that. It's starting to creep me out.
I want to hear from Chris. Chris hasn't said much of anything. What's up, Chris? Nice to meet you.
Hey, Chris, show us your deepest voice.
Hello. I have nothing special to say.
Okay.
But
you just come to hang out with us. We're just a ragtag group of guys.
I'm very glad Chris showed up. I met Chris a while back, and he and I haven't hung much, but we've chatted some, and I was just offered him the link and was thrilled that he came in. So here he is, and I know he does think about this stuff sometimes, and sometimes he wants to talk about it, and sometimes he doesn't. But he's this is certainly, if he wants to engage, he can do it. So he's doing good. Now we do have a quick super
we got
chat.
a few people.
Jake 4D, $2. Never seen a pre-sup argument that isn't dishonest. Well, there's a question to chat about. But anyways, I think one of you was going to say something. We can discuss that one if you want. But
well, I would say along the lines of internet presuppositionalism, that's not far off base. That's actually pretty accurate, but traditionally, presuppositionalism is not dishonest. It's more about having, a justification and ontology for, truth and things of that matter. It's when they take the bottom-up approach and not the top-down approach that becomes the issue. Because when you start with what you're trying to prove, that is begging the question. That is not... So Van Til made a distinction between virtuous circularity and vicious circularity. And of course, as you've stated many a times, Nick, we have the Munchausen trilemma, which eventually things are going to end in a circle in most cases, but it's a paradigm circularity. It's not at the same level of circularity. So when they start with God, therefore we can know these things, therefore God, they are in a vicious circle. It's if you can conclude your ontology as God and you're using God as an ontology, you can get to a paradigm circularity, which is no different than using language to justify language. At some point, we're going to get to a
All
circularity.
are going to be circular.
Yeah, and that's the thing
or
is,
brute factor, yeah.
or a brute fact.
Now,
I would argue that everything ends in circularity eventually. I think brute facts just kind of stop the eventual circularity. But I think that if we keep reasoning or keep justifying, eventually we're just going to be in a circle, no matter, what heuristic or paradigm that we use.
Well, I think with the Munchausen trilemma, sort of the point is you can pick your poison. If you want to always end in circular reasoning, you can. It's not that hard. If you want to end it on a brute fact, you can stop any circular reasoning with a brute fact. You can stop any brute fact with either an infinite regress or circular reasoning. Now, and you can look at the same problem that way. So what I could say to you is what the presuppositionalist is doing is actually asserting the brute fact of God first, then begging the question to get back to God. So I could either call that a brute fact if I say that's the initial assertion and I want to go at it from that point, or I can say it's circular reasoning. It really depends on how or where you'd like to go with it. And if you want to toss in an infinite regress again, you can. So you can really pick your poison. It's just going to have to be one of those three. And if you see the world in a way that's going to lean towards that circular, you're always going to land on that. But I think that's more preference than anything else.
Good. Yeah. And I want to ask about something once you're done with this response.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, we have to. We're eventually going to be. It's okay to have circularity paradigmatically.
Paradoxically.
Paradigm.
No,
is part
paradigm. Paradigmatically.
Paradigm.
Yeah, so it's okay to reach a circularity once we've exhausted all means of justification. And the issue that I have with the way that Darth and them, they don't exhaust justification. They start with what they're trying to prove. And that is the essence of begging the question or a vicious circularity.
And then they proceed to run an interrogation, especially Darth Dawkins. Particularly does. Yeah. And I've conversed with 5 times now. The first time was back in the Google Plus days on Google Hangouts. I'm still looking for the video of that. I haven't been able to find it. Apparently it's on YouTube somewhere, but so my first one seems to be gone. But it was that point that I realized he wants to run interrogations. And I was telling people even back then that, you know, if you want to have any kind of conversation with Darth in his court, you're going to need to be willing to let him have about 80% of the talking time.
And tell you the permissible answers, right? I mean, that's part of the. I like the word interrogation. I'd never thought of that, and I'd like to talk to you about that at some point off air, because I had a few. I have some questions I want to get your. But I like what you said about. Please ask
something that said, and I hear this kind of thing come up. Like he said, internet internet presuppositionalist. And I hear people say internet atheist, YouTube atheist, internet Christian, things like that. And I'm curious why people put the word internet in front of it, especially when it comes to atheism, because the activism I'm involved in is not just on the internet. And I just curious what you intended with that, because I'm trying to better understand what people mean. I'm not.
That means. Yeah, that means nothing more than popular level. Today's popular level is the internet. So, for example, if you hear me, I don't think you've ever heard me use the term internet atheist. I haven't. Yeah, I distinguish between new atheists and atheists. And new atheists would be those that are new to atheism, which is more your anti-theism. Not that all new atheists are anti-theists, and not that some atheists aren't anti-theists.
Okay, when it comes to new atheists, I agree with the first half of that they're new to atheism. The second half, assuming that they're anti-theistic, I don't find that always to be the case, although it's not uncommon. So I think it's important.
Yeah,
to be careful. How
So I'm addressing a specific crowd, the new to atheism, anti-theist.
Okay.
So if I use that, I'm talking about a specific kind of atheist, kind of like conservative evangelical. You know, I'm talking about more or less fundamentalism. I know a lot of evangelicals identify as conservative, but the real conservative evangelicals traditionally are your fundamentalists. But I don't call new atheists anti-theists because it's inflammatory to some of them, and I don't call conservative evangelicals fundamentalists because it's inflammatory to them. So I try to kind of be a little on the charitable side, you know, and not assume that they are anti-theists or they are fundamentalists. So that's all I mean by it is when I say internet, and the reason I make that distinction between popular level is because I'm involved. I'm not an academic myself, but I'm involved in a lot of the academic conversations, and they are far different than what we find on the internet. So when I talk about internet is, or things like that. It's more of a popular level because this is where the popular is.
It's
there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk about that right now. That like for instance, Darth, for example, right?
Sorry, Will. I just want to clarify with Eddie. So basically, it's not meant in any bad way. It's just meant to scope out the context.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. It's another way of saying popular level, but what is popular level without the internet?
Well,
I'm going to weigh in after Will. After Will, I do want to weigh in, but please, Will.
I think that's quite reasonable. Thank you very much for clarifying. Sorry, go ahead.
So like for the presuppositional position too, right? Like if you hear someone else doing a presuppositional argumentation, it isn't Darth Dawkins, right? He's not copying Darth Dawkins. This goes way before Darth Dawkins ever even talked on Google Hangouts, right? But because he's the most popular, he's famous for using that. It's kind of now it's like the Darth Dawkins argument, right? But it's not his argument, right? It's been around since
Well, I think people are more referring to the style, this is why
I say they're popularizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of the style of presuppositionalism, while Darth may in fact not be in error in some of the things he says, about justification and worldviews and things like that. It's the way he goes about it.
Sure. But that's the person. That's not the argument, right?
Well, but it is an argument that has been given a bad name because there are so many like Darth. And so I've been dealing with, so just to give you a little bit of idea, what turned me off to apologetics is, and more into philosophy of religion. One, I started in philosophy more than I did apologetics. When I discovered apologetics, I actually started off as a presuppositionalist. And the more conversations I tried to have with atheists from a presuppositionalist approach as it's used today, the more I realized that it's more about shutting down conversation than it is about actually having a conversation.
Yeah, it's a defense. It's not a witnessing technique, right? There's no intent of spreading the gospel there. It's simply to defend.
I think that's very sad. I think that's very sad that it's meant to shut down conversation because I think there's a lot more that could be had from those conversations. It's a shame that it's used as a tool of manipulation.
Right. It's not manipulation. It's just a defense, right? And because the other person cannot.
But you can. Wait a minute, Will. You can use it as a defense, but you can use it as a defense in the ultimate paradigm. When you start saying you can't justify your worldview.
Well, I don't agree with that.
Right, but that's the thing. That is the way that Darth uses it. That is the way that 𝐶10 used it. That is the way, because you can't justify your worldview, all of a sudden it's like, how dare you use logic? How dare you steal from my worldview? And it's presented in a way where you can't even get.
That's not the argument, right? That's added to the argument.
Well, that's how Darth frames it, though. I mean, that's how Darth frames it.
Yeah, but this goes.
Yeah. Okay, please.
Yeah. So
Van Til doesn't say to do that, right? In fact, he says the opposite, right? That it's supposed to be tied in with evangelism, right?
Right, but that's the thing, though. We're not talking about. So you're talking about pure traditional presuppositionalism, but the real fact of the matter is that's not what we deal with today. Almost nobody uses pure the presuppositional approach. Today, it's all about the 𝐶10 way of, and I wish you were familiar with 𝐶10, so you know exactly what I'm talking. Yeah, so you know exactly what I was talking about, because Darth is almost a clone of 𝐶10. This is exactly what 𝐶10 would do. We have to. Logic is like an axiom. It doesn't matter if you believe or not, or justify your worldview or not, or anything like that. We all use logic. So let's start with the same playing field and start with logic. And then we can reason our way to a worldview. And then ultimately, when we get to a point where certain things can't be justified, then we can talk about having a worldview that can justify these things. But the issue is they flip it around. They want a justification first, or
well, I mean, to be honest with you, and that's so like for me, being a theist, right? And like I said, most of the people that I deal with here, you know, Pat, Randolph, Nick, Amy, you know, all of the guys that I normally hang out with, right? They are not unreasonable to the point of saying, I literally was telling my story of how I came to be a theist in the first place to someone. And I'm not going to name who it was, but the individual, I was an atheist. I didn't believe in a God. Right? I had no belief of a God before I became saved, right? And he said, well, you just weren't atheist enough, because a real atheist would have need evidence in order to transfer over. I'm like, so are you pulling the no true atheist fallacy on me? Right? Because Christians say the exact same thing,
Christians
right?
Exactly. It's the exact same argument. You told your Lord.
Yeah. And so I was like, so you're basically saying that I was always a believer because I wasn't atheist enough. Because if I was a true atheist, I would have never converted.
No, true. Yeah.
Well,
right?
I get so nauseated when I hear I used to be a theist. I used to be a real into it, on fire for God theist. And then I also get nauseated a lot of times when I hear theists say, well, I used to be an atheist, you know, because it's almost like it's presented on either side. It's presented in a way to say, hey, I've been here and now I'm here. You haven't been here and you're here. So it's like it gives some kind of high road to the person.
There's no high road. I mean,
you know what I'm saying? Right, but you know what I'm saying? That's how it's used a lot of times.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't use that word, but yeah. My position's evolved, right? Yeah.
Right. But I always love it when they ask me to justify my own beliefs. Well, you justify your belief, right? I think it's such a it's such a double standard that I now have a belief that you require justification for, otherwise I'm somehow irrational. But so if I ask you to justify yours and you're somehow irrational, then I'm being dishonest. It doesn't. I don't think it's a fair.
Well, here and that comes out. Hold on, Randolph. I know you wanted to say something. I just want to say this real quick. But this comes down to, and this is one of the things that bothers me being a philosophy guy, especially in epistemology, is when I hear people throw around the word justification. Because you and I can be talking about justified and have two totally different epistemologies. And you may be justified on your epistemology, but you'll never be justified on my epistemology. I may be justified on my epistemology, but I may never be justified on your epistemology. And that's, and a lot of times.
Can I throw a hypothesis of why the presuppositional argument has kind of gone awry? And you may be correct.
Well, real quick, Randolph wanted to say something.
I think Randolph wants. Yeah, let's hit Randolph real quick, and then
just deal this first, and then I want to go back to the no true Scotsman fallacy because I have something a little bit longer to say. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was just saying that. Do you think that it's because you have people who aren't reformed who are picking up this form of argumentation, and therefore the holes in their theological worldview are allowing that it kind of forces them to do that? Or because a Calvinist was from a Reformed theological position, if Randolph has a different belief than me, I would say, yeah, of course he does, right? No big deal, right? There's no problem.
I think it's a far more powerful position if you are a Calvinist. Yeah. I think those who are non-Calvinists have a lot more legwork to do to use a presuppositional approach as tulip.
I think that's why they have to beat them down, though, right? Because according to them, in their worldview, right, the person has a choice to reject God.
Right.
It's not. There's no irresistible grace, right? So because that person is making that choice, right, they're being irrational. So I think that kind of negativity that's coming out of the argument, because Van Til said himself, right, that this is not an Arminian argument, right? This is for Reformed people, right? This only works out of a Reformed worldview.
That's what I was going to say. Is traditionally presuppositional apologetics is Reformed. It is a Reformed apologetic, and you have other people who's picked up this apologetic who aren't of the Reformed school, and they have a lot more holes they have to fill, because if one does have the power to choose, And you're presenting this apologetic that is, about a certain theology of divine election and things. You just have so much more work to do, unless I think you have a less robust kind of apologetic, because I honestly don't think it works outside of Calvinism. And that's one of the issues I do have with Darth and others who aren't Calvinists that use this apologetic, is you're missing a huge component of that, which is divine election, irresistible of grace, the different points of tulip that they don't hold to.
I agree.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Eddie on one observation there. The Calvinist position seeming very strong. Like when I was in the modern day debate with Will, that's when we first met. He and I agreed afterwards that neither of us lost. Neither of us won. We both ended up just not getting anywhere, but it was a really great conversation.
Cool.
I really enjoyed it. But
I mean, that's what's funny about that too, is when we first debated, I had zero philosophical knowledge. It was straight just theological positioning. But that's what I find myself unequipped for, is when I get into a conversation, as Eddie knows, like say on T-Jump server or some other server on Discord, where you have these people who just like to chuck out big philosophical terms, and try to get me in a gotcha box, right? I've never had those type, like, you guys did not prepare me for those types of conversations because you're nice, right? Nobody's out to get me in a gotcha box in 25 minutes, right? So, I need to be prepared, right? But me being a person who's more theologically based than they are philosophically based, I want a philosophy that's built on a foundation of theology, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what, and for me, being Reformed, unfortunately, that's presuppositionalism, but not in the same way that it's utilized by the people who have made it infamous, not famous.
Yeah. So the point I just wanted to get to as well with the no true Scotsman fallacy. Yeah, it's there are people who will say that we're not true atheists, or theists are not true Christians, or not true Muslims, or whatever. And over the years, I've asked people what, especially Christians, because it's mostly what I have access to, hundreds of people outside of the internet mostly. What is the minimum requirement to be a Christian? Or what is
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
That's an easy question.
Oh, no.
And the responses that I get vary.
I think the evening just changed.
The common denominator the common denominator that I find is the belief in the Christian God, or the belief in Allah if you're a Muslim, or for an atheist, not believing in any deities. So those are the common things. So to me, when somebody tells me they're a Christian, I just take them at their word, and I'm not saying you're not a true Christian. What it tells me right away is they believe in God. I know that. And then, of course, their denomination and their own ideas expand on that. But I know what the baseline is, and that's
right. So I think for me, for Christianity, if you want bare brass tacks of what it is, would simply believe that Jesus Christ is God, right? Died on the cross and rose again on the third day. So.
Yeah, that's a common.
So how many people are we willing to rule out here, and over what time period? So if people believe something in the 1600s and identified as Christian, is that old enough? Does it have to be like since the 800s? Like, what are our cutoffs? Because the things you guys are describing have not been held. Sorry, let me correct that. Because there are groups in Christianity who have existed since at least the 1600s. The oldest I know of is the Quakers. There are more current ones who have rejected the very things you guys are talking about. And I say rejected as dogma. They're not saying you can't believe this. They're saying we don't collectively think this is essential to being Christian. So if you guys are saying, okay, then we're not counting them as Christians, that's fine. But you have to understand
that don't believe in the divinity of Christ.
Let me make my position real clear.
Not at all.
All right.
Minimalist approach here. I know that.
Can I finish my sentence though? Sorry, and then I will stop. But if you guys are saying that those things are whichever, that you don't have to agree on it, but for each of you, those things are essential to being Christian, then I think you need to be alert to which groups of people who identify as Christian you are excluding. There needs to be a certain baseline knowledge, and it takes time to pick up, I grant that, but a certain baseline knowledge of who's out there and what they believe and who's being shut out. That's what I wanted to say.
That's why
I will interject. Hold up. I'm going to interject. We're going to do this one at a time because I think this is I think we should have this discussion. So let's have it. But we're going to do this just a touch carefully, and I'm going to plant a couple flags before we go forward. First, and I know what Randolph is going to say, and I want to have him say it, so he's going to go next. But I do want to say that I do. Oh, you're not going just yet, though. You're not going just yet. I'm going to plant a few flags here. First of all. I do think that what Will said was sort of off the cuff, and I said so. This is we've actually had a show on this topic. We had Marianne discuss it, and I think she brought up some excellent points. And so, like I said, let's get into it right now. That's cool, but I want to make sure we have a little form to this. I think Will was just sort of going off the cuff, and I think it's something that it would be eager to discuss and talk more about. But I don't think that was necessarily one that he says has to be the case. So I think we'll get into that. And if I'm wrong, he'll clarify. But I think that's his position. I also think Randolph said when this started that if somebody identifies as Christian, that's enough for him. And again, I think he's going to clarify that position in a minute. But I think Marianne has some excellent points, and I think there were founding fathers who identified as Christian who did not believe that Jesus was even the Son of God and removed miracles from the Bible. The Jefferson Bible is a consequence of that. So we are going to get into a No True Scotsman as we discuss this. People get pissed off. It happens with atheism. I've been on a dozen panels about what constitutes an atheist, and I've had people just bail and walk off the show. Everybody wants to be heard. I will make sure to the best of my ability everybody is heard and gets to say what they want to say. So what I'm going to ask here is, but you'll get your time, but we're going to do it one at a time. We're going to start with Randolph. I know Eddie wants to say something too, but because it was Will's comment that started it, it's going to go Randolph. He's going to get a couple minutes or however much time he needs or wants. Then Will's going to go. Then I'd like to hear from Eddie, and I'm sure Marianne's going to have a comment after that. So Randolph, what were you going to say?
Yeah, 2 points of clarification. So I'm just using a minimalist approach because that way my intention is to not exclude people. And in talking to people from so many different denominations, that's what I found over the years. I've been quite thorough about it. I'm not aware of any Christians who don't believe in the Christian God being that big God that people talk about in the Old Testament, or Jesus, either way, or the Trinity or whatever. But there's that belief is there. And I'm not meaning to discount that there are other nuances and variations on all this kind of stuff. I'm just trying to take a minimalist approach there. The other point was that when somebody does tell me that they are religious, they're Christian or Muslim, I tend to just take people at their word, because I don't really see why somebody would be lying about something like this. And I find very often in conversations, people are doubting what the other person said. They're like suspicious that they're lying or something. Now, if somebody dressed up in Muslim garb comes along and tells me that they're a Catholic, I'm going to have some questions, but normally this doesn't happen. So people are pretty consistent. So that's all I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
Well, I mean, for me, that was the basics. I thought I was being very generous there with my response. I could have been far more specific.
Well, so let me ask you just a quick question, though, Will. If somebody self-identifies as Christian, and I've done this before, I'll read from oh dear Lord, the dictionary. And I hate to make an argument from the dictionary, but one of the things I've noticed is that there's actually an acceptable definition of Christian in the dictionary that says somebody who believes in the values of Jesus Christ, period. It doesn't say, now this is, okay, now this, and I can see why, and this is what makes No True Scotsman so difficult, of course, but that does appear to be a definition that's acceptable enough that it's been in the dictionary. So I'm curious. So I did want to catch your, and I did mention a few other people who have self-identified as Christian, and maybe that. So here's a shocking question. What if somebody says, "I believe in the values"?
Where'd you get the dictionary from? Because I think
it was Webster's. I'll look it up. I'll look it up in a second while you're talking, and I'll. But so the question is, what happens if somebody says, "Well, the values that I hold are Christian. Mm-hmm. I believe in all of the things that Jesus said. I think he was the most amazing person to have ever been written about. And if it turned out he was fiction, I'd be okay with that, because that's how much I believe in those values and what he said. And if they identified with Christian, what would that make them?"
So for Christianity, in my mind, we're talking about salvific grace, right? So who has received what is the minimum required of receiving salvific grace? By whatever method you believe that comes, whether it's by works or grace alone, right? Sola fide, or I'm not talking about that. But I would say like your bare necessity would be to believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, right? That he died on the cross and rose again, right?
Yeah,
Or
and
how the incarnation works, or whether you believe that the Trinity is in monarchism or modality, it doesn't matter, right? Most people agree that Jesus is God and that he died and rose again, and that's how we are saved.
All right, I do want to give Eddie a moment, and then Marianne is going to have something awesome to say about that because she's always does. But let's give Eddie a minute, and then I'd like to hear from Marianne. And Marianne's going to get a little extra time, and the reason is because she's talking to three of you instead of one. So she's going to get a little extra time, but I would like to hear from Eddie, at least if he wants to say something. I think Eddie wanted to say something.
Yeah. So the no true Scotsman is a fallacy. It is an actual fallacy. It's an error in reasoning. What the reason it's an error in reasoning is because we set up special circumstances to qualify a certain people and then ad hoc rationalize why others don't fit into that. Because if we use a no true Scotsman, then a Jehovah's Witness is justified. Then a Mormon is justified. Because all we have to do is set up ad hoc rationalization to say these people don't follow a certain criteria, therefore they can't be identified as this. And according to your definition, Will, I wouldn't be a Christian because I'm agnostic on whether Christ was the Son of God or not. I mean, whether Christ was God himself or not. And not firmly believing that, I can't be a Christian, yet I mold my life around following Christ and the way that Christ, the people that he went amongst and the teachings that he made. Because to me, a Christian is a Christ follower. All the theology doesn't matter if one follows Christ, which is what I consider myself, a Christ follower. I don't think I have to have a specific correct theology in order to be saved, because Jesus said himself, if you love me, you'll
keep my commandments.
Keep my commandments and feed my sheep? So these are the things in Christ. Everything that Christ taught about, if we take the whole New Testament and we look at the whole paradigm, almost everything that Christ talked about was the heart and intentions. It doesn't matter what you do outwardly, it's what you do inwardly. Now, I'm not saying that we're justified and saved through these acts, but this is what Christ taught. So for me, at bare minimum, if somebody identifies as a Christian, a Christ follower, I have no problem with calling them a Christian, because one of the main reasons why is because judge not lest you be judged, for the measure that you judge is the measure that's going to be used against you. So if I think that I have this right equation for people to be saved and I'm wrong about that equation, that's what's going to be used to judge me. And I don't want to be judged by the measures that I judge other people. So I'd rather just say, hey, if they identify as a Christ follower and they believe that, or they believe that Christ was the atonement for their sins and that Christ is who he said he was, we can disagree or not come to the same theology on exactly who Christ was, because according to Judaism, the Messiah was never supposed to be a part of God. And that's where Orthodox Christianity deviates from Jewish thought or Jewish theology and Jewish metaphysics. So I think that knowing that Christ is God himself is not important to knowing who Christ was and what he did, as it is revealed to us as clearly and stated as it is in Scripture, because we can argue all day long about the incarnation. We can argue about, how God can be fully man and fully human. Fully God at the same time. These are, I think, now I know the Orthodox Church and quite a few Protestant churches would say these are essential issues, but I don't think that they are essential issues, because anything that deviates from orthodoxy is considered heresy. But that resides on the fact that the church is the ultimate authority. So while most Protestants would deny that the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church is the ultimate authority, they're quick to point out heresy. But heresy is what's been deemed heresy by the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church, because they think they are the ultimate authority.
All right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to interject here for a minute. So, and it looks like a couple of the people have some things they want to say. Jake4D wants to have something to say. So what I'd like to do is this. I'd like to give Marianne a couple of minutes to respond. And I think she's going to tell us what's on her mind. And then I'm just going to sort of open it up. I would like to let Jake4D talk, because he has something he wants to say. So after Marianne, I'd kind of like him to be able to go first. But I'm going to stop interfering, and I'm going to stop doing turns unless everybody starts to talk past each other, and unless it gets kind of hostile, and then I'll interject again. But I think after she's done, I think it looks like everybody's at least got their primary starting positions down, and I think we can have a good conversation going forward. Again, keeping in mind that Jake's been patient, and I think he wants to say something. So, Marianne, do your thing, and then we can just continue the conversation as naturally as it goes.
Okay. I could say a lot. I'm going to try to keep this super short. I think Eddie has boiled it down to a lot of the views that Christians do have in common. In particular, the statement, all the theology doesn't matter if one follows Christ. But then, of course, you get into what does Christ mean. So I want to clarify that. And then I do want to point out where I think we disagree in terms of being inclusive of Christians as they are. Now, you can say we should or shouldn't include certain people, but in terms of just who's out there, I think he's already excluded some people. But yeah, first, Christ meaning quite literally from, I can't remember my Greek characters, but meaning anointed one, Christos, and anointed one not being specific to the Messiah back at the time. It was actually used for high priests. It was used for a number of people in positions of authority. So it indicates authority, particularly, but not always, in the religious sphere. That's as far as that goes, at least in terms of the lingo of the time. Now, obviously, lots of people over the centuries have defined Christ and narrowed it down and said, this is what we mean by it, fine. But there is an argument to be made. If someone says, I understand Christ to mean someone with authority in this sphere, there's an argument to say that is how it was used. Okay, so that I would consider that the bare minimum. And saying someone with authority is pretty damn vague. So when we say all the theology doesn't matter if one follows Christ, well, even there's an awful lot of room for interpretation. So that's point 1 of 2, and then I will stop. Point 2, and this is where we disagree, and I think people are getting excluded. I think this was also Eddie saying, if they believe that Christ was the atonement for their sins, we can disagree, and then I put paraphrasing on everything else. And he noted that's where Christianity diverges from Judaism. That is, to me, a big problem. And the big problem is that, yes, that worldwide, that has become, worldwide and over the centuries, so in place and time, that has become the generally accepted standard for Christianity. This idea of Jesus died to save us from our sins. It's actually got a general name and then a lot of specific names. The general name, you can check it out on Wikipedia, is the doctrine of substitutionary atonement. And then there's so many different versions of it: the ransom theory, satisfaction theory, yada, yada, yada. That does not date back to biblical times, just so we're all clear. That dates back to a number of theologians. We've got those people popularly known as saints, St. Augustine, St. Anselm, a bunch of others, who came up with variations on this idea. It is, and Paul kind of started to tease at it, but never really developed it. That is a developed idea that's become accepted as the core of Christianity, is very much post-biblical. So again, we can say that's our standard now, but we have to understand that there are groups of people identifying as Christian who say, just because the church leaders in the 400s through 800s, made this the focus of the PR, and this is what's now accepted, does not mean I have to accept it in order to follow Jesus. So there are big groups out there who and I'm in them, swimming among them, I guess, who do not agree with the doctrine of substitutionary atonement, that Jesus died to save us from our sins.
All right, Jake, was there something you wanted to say? And we'll open it up, but Jake, I want to make sure it gets in.
Yeah, I did want to respond to that.
Yeah, how's my mic level?
It's perfect.
All right, yeah. So the you are gonna have to exclude people from categorizations. It's only a fallacious no true Scotsman if you're ad hoc excluding people, but you do have to set up some criteria. Like I definitely wouldn't accept somebody as a Christian just because they say they're a Christian, but they also say they don't believe that any gods do or can exist, and they don't follow the Bible's teachings, and they only go to church for the music or something like that, and only like once a year. It's like, it's so far apart from what we understand as Christian that it loses all meaning from it. And somewhere between that and like your specific doctrine, somewhere in the middle of those two is a gray area, and it's entirely appropriate to exclude people. I would consider Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons as a splinter group. They are no longer Christian, although their religion, their theology is derived from Christianity in the same way that Christianity and Islam come from Judaism. They are Abrahamic religions, but they are no longer Judaism. They are a separate religion. I've always taken the best way to classify somebody as a Christian is if they believe that Jesus' sacrifice took away their sin or absolved them of their sin. And I've more recently included, like, it doesn't necessarily matter if they believe Jesus was corporeal, if it happened on earth or if it happened in like the heavenly plane or something like that. But as long as they minimally believe that Jesus' sacrifice took away their sin to be a Christian, and that's definitely, it can be varied on that. It's not a hard only thing, but there is some point at which calling yourself Christian is just going to lose all value, and it no longer makes any sense. And with every conversation, we are going to have to say, okay, excellent, that's what you call yourself, so tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that. Like when I hear somebody's an atheist, I go, okay, excellent. Now, what kind of atheist are you? Are you a philosophical atheist, or are you a lack of belief atheist? And
Well, okay, so and I definitely want to hear. So I know everyone else wants to, and I want to lay down one other set of ground rules, which is I've known Marianne for like 4 or 5 years at least, and I've probably wanted to murder her like 600, 700 times in that. So I completely understand anybody's views in this going forward. So she speaks her mind. So let's see. So Eddie, I know you wanted to say something. I'm sure Will wants to say something. Like I said, it's open, guys. You guys can handle it, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I wanted to respond. to what Marianne had said. So when I take the word Christian, I mean it in the most basic sense, a Christ follower. Only God knows the heart. Only God knows the intentions. I don't have a criteria. I don't think any of us have a criteria to say who is a Christ follower and who isn't, because what is the litmus test? So, and I think this comes down to people's idea of salvation. And to give you an idea of where I'm coming from, I think that I'm a hopeful universalist who holds to annihilationism. And I think that everyone's going to be judged according to their revelation, according to the knowledge that's been revealed to them and what they did with that. I think God is the ultimate judge and justified in making those judgments. I don't think that any human being can say who's going to be saved and who isn't. And I think that's Scripture's extremely clear that we're not in an epistemic position to even know that. So when we give this whole litmus test of what qualifies as a Christian or who's going to be saved or who isn't going to be saved, and there's a lot of universalists out there who's even in Hasidic Judaism, all those that are faithful to the Abrahamic God will spend time in Sheol and ultimately rewarded for their mitzvahs. There's this idea that we have to have a litmus test of beliefs is something that's kind of evolved in the church. Now, I would say that Paul was extremely clear when he said that Jesus died for our sins, that would be a core. If Jesus wasn't the atoning sacrifice, given he was the ultimate Passover lamb, the sacrificial lamb, he was the culmination of what Passover was, then I don't even know what's special about Jesus if that's not at least one defining factor of who Jesus is. Now, again, when it comes to beliefs, I'm not sure what litmus test of beliefs there are to qualify. So I leave it in God's hands. And if somebody tells me they're a Christian, just like somebody says they're an atheist and they just lack belief, I don't care. If they're an atheist, I identify them as an atheist. That whatever version of atheism that they hold to, or agnosticism, if somebody tells me they're a Christian, I take that at bare-face minimum that they are a Christ follower. And it doesn't matter at the end of the day, I'm not going to treat them any different than I do any other human being. So I'm not even sure exactly what's in the importance of the label anyway, other than Christians distinguishing themselves from each other or quote unquote non-Christians.
Yeah, I mean, so, and like I agree, and you being an agnostic Christian or whatever, it says that you don't know. I don't believe that you'll necessarily have that belief forever. I believe that at some point you will figure out a position on that, right? Or do you never intend to figure a position on
that? No. Yeah, I am definitely working through it. So, I'm open to.
But I mean, that's because you're still, searching, going through the progress. Like if you were to say, no, I'm an agnostic Christian forever, I don't. Then we might have a conversation. But because you are open-mindedly searching for truth and doing all that stuff, I can call you brother and hold out. But for me, and just me, and maybe you have to understand that my theological position is fairly staunch and fairly consistently, right? So I thought I was being very, very generous because there's a lot more things that I could have stacked on that plate that would have sent some people off the road.
The evening just changed. Like we're gonna,
But I thought that was like non-controversial whatsoever. I was wrong. But for me, it's like Judaism, belief in Yahweh, right? Islam believe that Yahweh is God, right? Islam believe that Allah is God, right? Christianity believes that Jesus is God, right? I just, I thought that was pretty standard and basic, but like Eddie said, I agree with Eddie said, right? in the end, it is God that chooses, right? My thoughts on who is or who isn't, justified is irrelevant, right? I'm not the one making that choice, right? God is, right? But I do think that there are things in the text that would that I would warn caution with, right? But that's it, just caution. But I don't judge anyone because eventually God has placed all of us where we were supposed to be. So, believer, non-believer, not sure. We're all where God wants us to be. So it's all good.
Is Marianne? I think she's still here. She's still here. I was wondering if there was anything else.
Yeah, I'm typing notes actually.
Oh, okay.
'Cause it's interesting. It's just I'm writing down ideas as I hear them. Again, lots I could say, but I think I think Eddie and I are very close actually in views, and saying that if someone identifies as Christian, like that's a starting place. To say that someone, I don't think I've ever said that someone wasn't a Christian. And as I just put in the YouTube comments, I think that some of the theologies out there are completely wackadoodle. They're just I can't recognize anything of what I think or what I understand of the Bible and the characters and the history. I can't recognize a drop of it in what they're saying. But it is not for me to then decide that they can't identify as Christian or that they don't qualify. Right? I suppose my bare minimum comes down to similar to his, that statement that I got to pull it up here. All the theology doesn't matter if one follows Christ. And as I said, there's an awful lot of room in that. And following Christ does not mean necessarily what one, instinctively or knee-jerk thinks it may mean. That's kind of my starting point as well. Most of the specifics folks have mentioned here I could dispute, and we're not here to spend the whole night disputing, so I'm not going to do that. I will say, though, that when we start doing things like appealing to what Paul said, you have to look at to what extent do you take the Bible as inerrant, being in somehow perfect and free of error. To what extent do you take Paul even as being Paul? Because it's pretty well agreed among biblical scholars that there more than one person wrote the items that are listed as the books being written by him. So including students of his who had a different take than the actual original Paul would have. You see a development of how the community thought. And it was considered an honor back then to write under your teacher's name. It's giving them the credit and not yourself. It's not being duplicitous. It's that was kind of the standard. If you're a student of X, you write under that name. As Christians say today, give God the glory, right? That you hear that all the time. It's sort of that concept of here's my work, but I give Paul the glory because he taught me. So it gets so freaking messy when you look at who said what and how much do we trust it. I'm not someone who believes in biblical inerrancy. Not only do I think Paul can be in error and all the Pauls, but I think that any of the books can be in error and very much are in spots. You can see what's been interpolated and wasn't there originally. Sometimes, often you can't. It's a mess. So whenever we appeal to what's in the Bible, even there, you have to say to yourself, what are the core things? Where are the threads that hold strong? And where are the things that really kind of don't fit? And when they don't fit, I have no compunction about saying this doesn't appear to be central to what the thinking was at the time. This seems to be something tossed in later. I have no problem with that. So when we say, what are the bare minimums and start appealing to, well, Paul said it is this, I get some people take that very seriously, and Paul is not to be disputed. I'm not one of them. I'm just going to leave it there.
Yeah, on that point, and that's a fair point. I'm not an inerrantist either. But what I quoted was from 1 Corinthians, which is universally agreed that is authentic Pauline letters. But I also understand Paul is a man of extremes. He, goes from one extreme to the next quite often. It's just his personality. But I don't think that there's just, so much that's open to interpretation in 1 Corinthians 15 when Paul talks about, and I think it fits into the ultimate Passover lamb, that Christ was. But I think you make fair points, and I would definitely agree that a lot of Christians need to realize that not all of the Pauline letters are considered authentic. I think it's 6 to 7 that are almost universally agreed that are Pauline. But even then, we have to take into account, I kind of have a rebuff to Paulinian Christians. Paul seems to fill out a lot of theology that just doesn't seem to be there in a lot of the other parts of the New Testament. And I'm not against Pauline theology, but I think that a lot of Christians put a lot of stock into the theology they derived from Paul without really understanding who Paul was.
Yes, I agree.
All right, so just to let people know, what I think we'll do is, start wrapping up in about 15 minutes or so. So I want to make sure, I think I think we had a lot of really great conversations. So thank you all for joining us, and I don't want to just put a stop to it, but we're going to start. What? I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. I wanted to address the definition from the dictionary that you mentioned earlier, but go ahead.
Oh, no, so we're definitely not stopping like right now. It's not a hard stop. I just want to give everyone kind of a warning. I think we're getting a little late. It's coming up on 1 a.m. where I am, and so I'd like to try to be done
Midnight.
at least by then. So yeah, so I think we're looking at roughly 15 minutes is what we're shooting for. So I want to make sure if anybody has anything they want to say, they get that said, and otherwise, that's just so that everyone knows. We'll just start winding down and try not to bring up any new huge topics, and let's wrap this one up so that we're all feeling good about it. So Randolph wanted to say something. I don't know if Jake wants to say something. Your hand was up, but it's I want to make sure Jake gets heard if he's got something. So either of you,
Jake or Jacob? Isn't that two different people?
Am I missing? Well, okay. I don't see anyone other than. I'm sorry. Who else is on the screen that I'm missing? I saw Jake.
Jake, Chris.
Jake 4D on the screen.
Oh, there is a Jacob Cheeseman. Other than Jake.
I didn't. I don't even see that. That's not on my screen. Everyone else seems to be able. I cannot wait to get rid of Skype. I I don't have a list of. So wait, this may help me get the. There is a. It's not showing that for me, so I don't. I have a list.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it either
on this call, and I'm not seeing anyone else. So I know Jake 4D has the thing up. So if he wanted to say something, I want to make sure he gets heard. And I know Randolph wants to say something. Oh, okay, cool, perfect. So Randolph, what was it you wanted? What was it you want to say?
It was the definition that you had put about something about. Maybe you can just kind of review quickly what that definition was.
I found a couple of them and I'd forgotten. It was one dictionary. It was one of the major ones, but the what it had said was somebody who follows the teachings of Jesus, and that was the bare minimum. Now it had other ones, including someone who follows the religious of. But that was it.
Yeah,
so like Oxford says, a person who's received Christian baptism or is a believer in Christianity.
Okay. But I wanted to address the one that Nick just said because Dr. Jordan Peterson uses that in his sneaky argumentation, where he claims that, and I've encountered other Christians in debates saying that, oh, you act like a Christian, or Jordan Peterson comes along and says atheists are all just Christians, but they just don't know it, and stuff like that, and. Yeah, and I actually wanted to debate with Jordan Peterson on that particular topic because Matt Dillahunty, he was telling about at the Chan Center Performing Arts at UBC here in British Columbia, Canada, a while ago. And Matt Dillahunty asked him, what in that case does he think a true atheist would be like? And Jordan Peterson's response was, a true atheist would be like Raskolnikov from from Crime and Punishment, the novel, and just going around murdering people. So I pushed back against that. Yeah, and he was abundantly clear about that. There's no confusion at all. He's a good orator. He was very clear. But I just find that this kind of idea is unacceptable to me, because it gives too much credit to an ideology. The ideology, the problem I have with it is, although the ideology can be a legitimate source of all kinds of different practices and things that are good, it's not the only source. There are other sources for these things as well that develop in parallel. Look at Chinese history that goes back over 6,500 years of people being able to read and write and develop Chinese medicine, and there's all kinds of ideas in there that came, and there was really no exposure to these other ideologies at that time, and yet different people come up with different ideas, and there's little tribes out in the Amazon that are completely isolated, and they have all kinds of moral standards too. So for him to say that atheists are acting like Christians, or the others I've known, and so therefore we're Christians and we just don't know it, I find it ludicrous. And so that's the complaint that I have about that definition and definitions like it, because they give more credit than is due, I think, and they kind of make it easier for people to make those kind of dishonest arguments.
I'm surprised to hear that he had said that, and especially to
let me comment on that. Let me comment on that. And far be it for me to defend Jordan Peterson, but
I'll apologize on your behalf because I'm Canadian.
But you have to understand the paradigm that he's talking through. Now, obviously, I think his words are sloppy. But he is a pragmatic theist. He's not necessarily a believer. He follows Christianity because of if you saw his discussions with Sam Harris, he illuminated this really, really clearly, that he thinks that there's value in deeming things good and bad, evil, and not evil or good. And so when he talks in these kind of ways, he's talking in a pragmatic sense. So what he means is an atheist has a sense of good and evil. They have a sense of morality that is that wants justice and wants good things to prevail. And the only reason he even advocates for Christianity is because of the nuance and the storytelling aspect of good and evil. And so I think what he means is, when he says things like that, is people live as though there is good and evil. And if you're living as though there is good and evil, then you have a kind of pragmatic theism behind it, whether you acknowledge that or not. So I don't think what he meant was that atheists who live truly as atheists would be, mass murderers and things like that. I think what he meant was, if one lived void of this idea, or this pragmatic idea of good and evil, and we just lived in this kind of reality where there isn't justice, there isn't good things, and evil doesn't prevail. I think that's more what he was talking about, but I think his choice of words were extremely poor, if that's exactly the way he said it.
So you're talking about what he discussed before the conversation with Matt Dillahunty in Sam Harris's podcast. I don't disagree with you on all that stuff. I think your assessment is correct there. He clarified in the conversation with Matt Dillahunty and was abundantly clear about this. What he seems to mean is that without this guidance from God, atheists wouldn't be able to stop themselves from killing other people and become murderers and all this. And he was quite clear about that. If you were to listen to that, I think you'd be kind of shocked.
Well, I did listen to the conversation, and I don't. Yeah. I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't remember that part of the conversation, but I will definitely go back and look at it.
I'm interested in it.
On that point, I've heard it a few times, and there's other people who are pulling that crap as well. And it is part of the aim that they have to vilify atheists. Now, if he's saying that true atheists would be like that, and he's claiming he's not like that in that conversation, he is implicitly saying that he's Christian. And I think Matt Dillahunty managed to get that out of him as well. So you're laughing, Will. You're enjoying this.
Yeah, but you got to, but seriously, though, he is purely a pragmatic Christian. He only follows what he thinks is the positive tenets of it, not because he believes in a deity, not because he believes that Christ was, who he said he was.
He's talked about Christ, and he's talked about all this kind of stuff. He seems to be a believer, but I don't disagree with you.
I would disagree that he doesn't seem to be a believer.
If he actually put it that way, I would call him an atheist. I mean, to my mind, that would be an atheist. If he does not believe that there actually is a higher power, then in my view,
but he's been skirting that issue for quite a long time.
That's because he's
theist.
Well, that's because he knows his audience and who pays his bills. Yeah. He knows he can't come out and answer those questions very, very poignantly because
he believes in a God. He just doesn't believe in a specific God. Right? He's just
I don't think he believes in any God. I think
he has, yeah.
I think he is purely pragmatic.
What matters to me is the vilification that he's been doing against atheists. That's what matters to me.
That language is dangerous. I mean, that language, if he compared atheists to Raskolnikov,
I would agree completely. If he said things like that and he wasn't making extremely clear that he's talking about the pragmatic approach that he takes, and you got to understand that pragmatic theism is a thing. There are a lot of people who follow. Because I mean, if we just look at the mental health aspect and things like that, there is a higher. I don't know what the correlation is there, but those who are practicing spirituality and things, whether it is atheism or not, there is a more of a medical benefit from it. But I think that as a psychologist, that's more of what he's focused on, is the mental health aspect of it, the practicality, the pragmatism of it. And I think the only reason he doesn't make clear his stance is because of his niche audience that he has, and he can't reveal too much. But I've listened enough of Jordan Peterson. He was somebody I resisted for a long time because he was just seemed too esoteric to me. But once I really, because I'm a philosophy guy, I'm very analytic. I'm a very analytical philosophy guy, Western philosophy, and he's a psychology guy. So he comes at things for more of a continental philosophy or more of a psychological understanding. So trying to understand his approach and the things he's saying, just to me, for a long time, I couldn't make sense of any of it. And then when I actually listened to, what he was saying and had his discussions with Sam Harris and a few other people, and I started to kind of put the pieces together, then I realized.
Those are older conversations. And since his near-death experience, he's come out and straight up confessed. He said he believes in a higher power, right?
Yeah,
okay. And I wasn't aware of that.
He does write and say many good things, but he also does. There are problems with a lot of the things he puts forward too. And one example would be the 12 Rules of Life that he published. I think most of them are hugely problematic. And I'll give you probably one of the craziest examples in those 12 Rules of Life. One of them is pet a cat every day. Well, this isn't going to work for people who are allergic to cats. So this is not a very good rule for life for everybody. And he's putting it out there as if it's everybody follows this, the world will be a better place.
I don't like cats. So.
Well, and
I'm a dog person too.
So I don't get a chance read as much as I'd like to, but I read that one fully through, and it's crystal clear. Xandering likes Jordan Peterson, and so he's been encouraging me to learn a bit more about him, and I've been resisting it for quite some time because I'm just like what I've heard. I'm just like I got enough.
A lot of the retail crowd like it too.
But and a lot of what I've been hearing, I was like, you know what, this isn't, and it gets nuanced, and I can see how he gets his ass in trouble because he says shit that if you're not careful. But on the flip side, I do think the point Dostoevsky was trying to make there was exactly the point that Randolph said that what's his name, was trying to make, Jordan Peterson was trying to make, and I didn't see it, but the point Raskolnikov does is once he decides that he doesn't think there's a God, then anything is permissible, and there is could he possibly get caught? What would it even mean to be evil? Yada yada yada. So he commits the murder just to see what would happen, essentially. Now, that's not, would all go around murdering, but that is really basically saying we wouldn't have a reason not to murder. And I think if he actually said that strikes me as a very dangerous and quite dismissive thing to say offhand. And you'd expect someone as educated as Jordan Peterson not to do that, because that book was crystal clear about its opinion of atheists. Yeah.
Hey, Nick,
guys,
check out private chat. Jacob is a real person.
Oh, okay. We are having. Most of us can't see him. I don't know what. We have two Jake?
Jake.
Oh, hold on. All right. Well, now, so it looks like I don't know what's going on. It looks like we've been having some issues with the Skype, and at least one thing happened here, which was we had a name that
it says Jacob Cheeseman.
We
not Jake. Yeah, not Jake 4D.
There appears to be so, and then so there appears to be then another Jake, and so I don't know how or why.
Scratch the record of what I said.
I think you're just seeing a different view of his name. I'm seeing his name as he has it on screen. Yeah.
Hang on, Jacob.
No, he is replying in chat right now.
Jacob,
not under anything with the name you said.
Stop. Jacob has made an important point in the chat, Nick. You need to take a look at that.
All right. What I'm going to do is
the
thing reset. So I'm going to go quickly look at that. Give me a second because I got out of the chat and the whole thing.
Yeah, go back and edit that because Jacob has an issue.
Let me
yeah.
Okay, it's not even there you go. I can't wait to.
It's a reasonable request.
Can I put my hand up verbally here? I've got too many windows open to go find the hand function, but once this is sorted out.
Just go ahead and talk.
Go ahead. Well, I know we've got people waiting to talk and trying to get into the chat, but anyway, I do want to point out that much as on my social media platform of choice, Twitter, this conversation seems to be heavily oriented towards North American and mostly American perspectives. I know Jordan Peterson is Canadian, but he's really built his following mostly in the US. And I think you guys are missing a good chunk of who's out there, both in time and place. So by time, I'm talking about this guy is time and place because he's from the UK and he's also from the 70s and 80s. Don, I don't know if it said Cupid or Cupitt, Cupitt, who identified, he kind of introduced the idea of Christian non-realism, the idea that it's not necessary for certain concepts to be, particularly those of God and Christ Messiah and things like that, to be real in order to be meaningful, okay? So that's the UK in the 70s and 80s. We've got, we've got so many of them. And yes, I do use God and Jesus very liberally and in vain. Paul Van Buren died in the 90s, was a theologian and author. Now, he was in the US, but I'm saying that's decades ago. That's almost 25 years ago, but said really important stuff around he identified as a Christian atheist himself. I just think that when you guys are talking about theists and atheists and, what a fundamentalist Christian is and the rest of it, there's these chunks of history that I see missing. And I think that might be why you're wrestling with some of these ideas about, what is the bare minimum expectation, is because maybe you don't have some of that history. So I'd encourage you to maybe look around a bit more. That sounds really arrogant, but I don't know how else to put it.
With Buddhism, I've known people who are only into the philosophical aspects of it, and they call themselves philosophical Buddhists. And so probably what you're referring to would probably fit as a philosophical Christian. They're not into any of the other kind of the beliefs in the deities or anything like that. And
yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, there is a lot of that, but also some of these people were like ordained ministers who continued to have congregations. There is a fairly large following in particularly the Netherlands, certainly in the early 2000s. I haven't seen anything since 2008. But I imagine, it was huge back then, who are very much into all of the rituals and what they would probably describe as spirituality, and nonetheless identify as agnostic or atheist. So it's not as simple as philosophy versus religion. There are many people who value religion and yet have dropped the theistic aspects. So I'm just saying there's a world of stuff we're not talking about here.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is atheism doesn't have any position on spirits, as long as the spirits aren't deity dependent. Anything is dependent on deity.
That's what I mean by spiritual. I'm not talking about spirits. I'm talking about, some people would define it as the sense of oneness with all things, right? Which is more of a like Zen Buddhist. There's a huge meaning. There's a huge range of meaning when people say spirituality. But I'm saying that all I'm saying is that talking about current or maybe recently deceased American critics of theology is fine, as long as we realize that that is one chunk of a huge world of information and what people actually practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing is, there are many atheists who are spiritual. They're into all of this kind of stuff. It's all over the board. The only defining factor that I find with atheism is just not believing in any deities, any goddesses or gods, and that's it. So there are Buddhists I know, people who are into the Buddhist from the philosophical aspect, is what they'll say, and they're not into any of the deities or any of that other kind of stuff. So they're atheistic in that sense. So that's just the way it is. So
sure. Yeah. And you've got ministers and congregations in Christianity and in other faiths.
We have an atheist minister here in Canada.
Yes, we do. Greta Vosper, and I know her. Well, I don't know her personally, but I know her congregation, and I've been there.
Yeah, she's quite competent at her job, apparently.
It doesn't matter. All atheists are going to hell anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Talk about going to hell. I need to get back on Discord, so I'm gonna have to.
Anyway,
according to a lot of Christians, only atheists go to heaven.
Yeah, well, according to a lot of Christians, I'm going to hell too, so I'll be hanging out on the couch with a bunch of atheists.
Oh, I take pride in being one of the first people that 𝐂𝐚𝐥𝐸 would have torched. Absolutely, he would have been sending me straight there.
Well, Eddie, if it's true that there is a hell, I guess I'll be in good company and looking forward to getting into hell.
Nobody give Will a lighter.
Will doesn't know where it's going.
Ouch.
There's so many ways to read that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think that was the.
I'm a Calvinist by any metric. Yeah, I'm by any metric except for maybe Catholicism.
Well, according to Will, God has the lighter. And God chooses who gets the lighter.
No, according to Will, God already chose who
yes, God has already chosen.
He has chosen.
That's right.
Yes,
He's getting the lighter.
There's nothing we can do. That lighter is out there somewhere.
It is determined. Hey, on that note,
fact,
before you close out,
theory of time, it's already happening.
That's right. That's right. It's happening at the same time while everything else is happening. On that same note, though, real quick, Nick, I got to tell you about my new toy.
Okay.
So, did you know that they make blow torches for propane tanks?
I did not know
propane accessories.
That is terrifying.
Like, hold on. The propane tank you grill with not
That's
the little
terrifying.
tank.
Because I have one for the little tank.
Well,
No, I got one for
for an
the
LP,
big tank.
or like an LP tank, right? Like is what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I did not
Yes.
know that.
So
It's that one that's on a like a 10-foot hose, and it's like
it's about
Oh,
three. Well, it's about 3 or 4 foot. Mine's shorter than that. It's on a three,
It's supposed
three
to
or
be like
4
a weed
foot hose.
burner, right? Like a
Yeah,
driveway
it's-
weed
it's-
burner. Yeah.
It's for burning weeds, but
Yeah.
it is so much fun.
Well,
I got one
burning
little
weeds
one.
and filling potholes.
yeah, it's.
I use
it's
it to kill spiders in my garage too.
You
works
are
good,
you
man.
are going to
Yeah.
have to link me that, Eddie. I think you can't just tease me with that. You're gonna have to hit me up on Discord.
I almost burned the woods down beside us. I was having so much fun.
Yeah, well, hey, 4th of
it's
July,
like-
man.
hey,
We're gonna have fun on 4th of
It's
July.
like, hey, there's some leaves. Those will burn.
That's speaking of. Okay, now you're the Raskolnikov of
You're worried about giving
arson.
me a lighter for crying out loud.
Yeah. You know what?
The whole world's going up in flames, but
The only consideration when you're deciding as to what you should light on fire is it flammable? That's basically. All right. Well,
you know, it's funny. If you get certain things hot enough, almost everything becomes flammable.
Yeah.
Or meltable.
All right. Well, thank you guys all for coming. I had a blast. I hope you guys did too. I hope our audience did. And so what I'd like to do is we have somebody had said this was funny, and I think this is their first time here, which means they don't even realize the joke. They said everybody on the panel's the same.
Eddie's done something really special with that propane.
I'm sorry, what?
You haven't had a blast until Eddie's done something really special with that propane.
So somebody had said that everybody on the panel is the same, and since basically our live chat is 80% solipsist jokes, I was just like, you have no idea what you just. But I think you know what, I appreciate all of you for coming. I think you know what, I think we've covered a lot of really interesting stuff, and that can only happen when you have good and interesting people here, because you know these kind of things can.
Are the 20% new discoveries?
Are they 20% what?
New
Right,
discoveries?
Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to amend what I just said about good people, and I think you know what, virtually everybody in this panel is a good person, and I really appreciate having virtually all of you here. I don't know who sent Randolph the
Fun
link.
fact.
Yes.
Fun fact before we go.
Yeah.
Anytime a Calvinist walks into the room, an argument breaks out. Just so you know.
I noticed. All right. So what I'd like to do though is because of that, you know what, guys, in our live chat, anybody watching this later and anything like that, you're going to want to meet these people and go catch up with them. So I'd like to hear from each of them where they can be found on the interwebs, what it is they do, so that you know you guys can go out there and talk to these people, especially if you want to. You know, the big one is, and I understand this is going to be a big one. You're going to want to tell Eddie why he's wrong about anything. I mean, pretty much everything he said, you're going to want to go tell him why he's wrong. So we're going to make sure you can find him. We're going to put his personal his cell phone number and his email address in the description below. Please let him know why he's wrong about everything. So let's start with Will, since he's already on the screen. Will, where can people find you?
If you happen to like English football, Will Stewart THFC Rants is the name of my YouTube channel. I don't do any theological stuff on there. It's all about Tottenham Hotspur. But yeah, if you want to see that, if you want to hear me talk about theological stuff, Amy Newman's channel is a great place to find me here. Nick's channel is a great place to find me. Discord, wherever.
All right, thank you, Will. All right, and then actually, let's see, we've got next just on the screen here that I see is Jake4D. Jake4D, everyone who's been on the show knows him. He's been around. So, Jake, where can people find you? What are you about? Let everyone know, please.
Yeah, I'm doing a little bit of religion, philosophy type stuff on Jake4D on YouTube, and more like gaming and tech on Jake3D on YouTube as well. And then on Twitch, I use Jake3D, and we're playing more games. We're going back to some horror games tonight, and then some early access games later on. So if you want to continue the discussion there. One other thing I was really interested, I didn't have time to talk about, is anti-theism. So anybody wants to continue that conversation, Jake3D on Twitch.
Or maybe bring that up next week. There was a couple of comments. I actually also wanted to talk about that because I do have a slightly different opinion on the what was it, the YouTube atheists, or because I think what happens is I think there are plenty of atheists around. I've heard so many people say all atheists are assholes. Well, if you're on Twitter, all atheists are assholes, and the reason is the vast majority of people on Twitter go there for a fight, and whether they're atheists, theists, or whatever, So I think there's a propensity for the internet ones that are active to be far more aggressive. That's why they're on social media, and the ones that you would meet in everyday life are not, but you'll find that of every demographic you find on Twitter. So I'd like to, maybe next time. So if you come back next time, or if we, I don't think it's going to be a topic, but let's bring it up if we can, and hopefully we'll have that discussion. But thank you so much, Jake. Eddie, tell us a little bit about yourself and where, and the phone number is real. It's already, I put it in the description. So, but you don't need to put that one out. I did that for you. What else? Where can people find you?
Yes, brutefacts.com and Brutefacts Podcast on YouTube and every major podcast platform, Brutefacts Podcast. I interview academics, philosophy, history, everywhere in between, and even lay people, atheists, agnostics, Christians, theists, everybody. It's to get to know more about the person, less about their work or what made them famous. So check it out there. And Nick, I appreciate you having me on.
Always a pleasure, especially since you put up with all the shit I give you. So does Will. I have to figure out why you guys are so willing to come. So does Marianne, come to think of it. So does you know what? And so does Randolph. I'm just realizing that if you're a friend of mine, that usually means you're going to have to put up with a lot of shit. So, all right. But no, good to see you as always. And the other thing I wanted to point out, just because somebody asked about this in the live chat. So, Titan has dropped a link to our Discord. It's also in the description. But if you follow that link, and Titan's drops are always going to be much more. The one I gotta make sure the one in the description is always up to date, and sometimes they fall behind. But in either case, he's dropped it. All of these people are on the Discord too, so you can, if you want to know where their Discord is, or if you want to find them, they're on our Discord. You can go to our Discord. You can talk to them. You can bounce to their Discord. We would be happy to help you out. We're always happy to help you find and talk to these people, because I think we're about good conversations and getting to know what people are saying and doing. So join our Discord. Talk to them, find them, go join their Discord, and go have a good time. Marianne, tell us a little bit about yourself. She's on our Discord too. So, because somebody had been asking about her Twitter.
Yeah. So, I just posted that I think I'm Marleo on Discord, because Marianne was taken, and I put my Twitter handle on there for those who care. That's the best way. Like, if you just want to reach me and toss an idea at me, my DMs are open, and I'm checking Twitter most of the time. Most days, so you'll get a response. So Millennium3K3, it's there in the chat. Otherwise, I don't know what to say. I don't have a fancy show, folks. I'm obviously about 10 years behind the trends, and somehow my teenagers still think I'm a cool mom. So I'm about to lose that status very quickly, I think. I have some catching up to do.
I didn't realize they felt that way. I will make sure I chat with them later. Don't want any misconceptions.
You are never ever talking to my children.
I'm aware. All right, and last but not least, we're the Skype has been really. Several of you, Randolph has actually appeared at least twice, and I saw him at one point listed 3 times on the. I'd really like to know. I think he did that on purpose. I think he's doing one of those We Are Legion thing, and he's just like, oh, you invite me here, I'll be here in force. But Randolph, tell us a little bit about where people can find you and what you do.
Well, I run an organization here in Canada called the Canadian Atheists. We advocate for atheists, making sure, in the hopes that we all have the same treatment as theists do, because there is some preferential treatment still given to theists on certain things. So we just want a level playing field on all this. Thank you, Will. We're trying to counter the vilification and bring an end to the stigmatization that remains. It's not huge in Canada, but it does exist, and so we're trying to use non-confrontational approaches to achieve these goals, because we find that this seems to be a good approach for Canadian culture, fits in well. And we are promoting a campaign called Normalize Atheism, which you can read about at www.normalizeatheism.ca. And we're basically saying that when somebody comes along and says, okay, they're a theist, then typical response that we see in public is that, okay, this is normal, and they go about their day or carry on with the conversation. But if somebody like myself says I'm an atheist, I don't believe in any deities, then sometimes the response includes condescension or some kind of concern for that I'm going to burn in hell or something like that. And so what we're asking for is to people to just treat us the same as the theists and not go to these extra lengths, because it kind of implies that this is not normal, but it really is. And we're not saying that theism is not normal, because it is quite common. We're just saying we want atheists to not be seen as abnormal. So that's what we're hoping, is asking people to do less will be an easy thing for people to go along with. You can read more about the Canadian atheists at www.canadianatheists.ca. I also have a YouTube channel for anybody who's interested. It's at www.youtube.com/Randolph Richardson. And just make sure Randolph is spelled with the letter F rather than PH, even if autocorrect disagrees with you. Thank you, Nick, for hosting this. And thank you, everybody in the audience, for tuning in. It was great talking with everybody here. Thank you.
Thank you, Randolph. Okay, on the assumption I got everybody and their doppelgangers here. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Nick Suter. We do shows here on In Time, usually about 3 times a week, different kinds of shows. Friday, 10 p.m. every Friday, every week. You will find us here having these open chats. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be doing a regular In Time interview discussion show on Tuesday. Wednesday, we will be doing Overtime with Joe, and we'll be discussing the latest news, usually the U.S., but anything that's big, what we're going to talk about. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. It's a great way just to help us out. Join the Discord, catch up. Anybody here who is here tonight wants to continue on the Discord, please do so. I'll probably stop in for a little bit, because 1:15 now, but I'm still probably not going to go to bed. But you know what? If you can't catch us or any of our guests tonight, you can catch them tomorrow or some other time. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week or on the Discord later. Have a good night.